further down. So now it's just connections instead of connections to a subassembly. So then you just run these tiny flex assemblies to the connectors, and boom. So that was what Shaheen and I were talking about, and then Shaheen just took us down this encyclopedic knowledge of the processor. So hopefully he'll pop in at some point and put us all to sleep.
Yes. Yeah, Shaheen was fantastic. That was awesome. And then, by the way, also Jonathan in the audience is also pretty savvy on the semiconductor front. And then I see a personal fleshy friend of mine from Stockholm who I mentioned in our last gathering 7 hours ago. Mr. Patrick Walsh is on stage. And Patrick, I mentioned you because I literally said your name 8 hours ago when we meet twice a day here. And in our last gathering, we were talking about Ireland and how they got rolled out the red carpet for everybody, all the big tech companies. And I said, how cool is that we have somebody like you who is intimately involved in precisely that. And now we're working together in Stockholm, to raise the profile of Stockholm and whatnot. And you're one of the coolest people I've ever had the pleasure to work with. And but you happen to be Irish, and you were involved in that whole. I forget why we were talking about. Does somebody recall why I was talking about Ireland rolling out the red carpet for?
Just because Irish people are great, maybe.
Yeah, that could be part of it too.
Irish people are awesome.
Yeah.
Where's Dave? Where's our
I know. Where's Dave? So we've got two.
We got Patrick and Dave.
You've got
Where's
Aaron
Dave?
and Patrick. We've got two.
Oh, sorry, Aaron too. I love that.
Don't worry, hey mate. Don't forget about me. Come on, I can't say the number 33 either.
Where's Dave?
I've got a great 10-second Ireland story. I was basically learning how to drive because my wife and I were out there for a couple weeks for a job.
That sounds like a funny story in itself.
And I crashed into a paper shredder truck. And I'm like don't like to interrupt someone's day kind of guy. So I'm like, hey, I know you have to get going. There's no damage to your car. Like, you can get going. He's like, no, I'm fine. At the end of the day, if whatever I don't pick up today is going to get picked up tomorrow. Can I buy you a coffee? And in America, people would be like, fuck, man, I'm late. I got 10 more things to do. Thanks to you, I'm going to be here another 4 hours. And, so just amazing hospitality.
This is why
amazing
I love
grace.
the Irish.
Can I just tell everyone who's never been to Ireland, this is exactly what happens in an Irish pub. We all just start going off on stories and having crack like that. So that's exactly what it's like, Aaron. Good man.
Clubhouse was made for us, right?
This
Patrick,
is Tyler's
Clubhouse was made for Irish people.
Pub right here. This is Tyler's Irish pub.
Well, we could do an after-hours Irish pub. Yeah, we get Dave McGinty in here too.
Could do it. It'd be fun.
Yeah.
There is a guy who hosts an Irish pub on Clubhouse every day.
Brilliant. That Tyler's mom is Irish?
No, my dad is Irish. My mother's Polish. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, good point. So, what were we talking about, brother? We were talking about Ireland.
I was talking about you because I was mentioning how Ireland we were talking for some reason about tax rates in Europe, and I don't know why we got on that conversation, but your name came up in that anyway. So
I used to be a tax lawyer.
Yeah.
In Ireland during that time.
Yep.
PTR. I'm just happy with the Guinness draft.
Okay. Okay. By the way, Guinness in Japan tastes like ass for some reason.
No, you have to have the nama draft.
Trust me, I know. I'm
the tap.
Yeah, I grew up drinking Guinness, being half Irish and everything. So
Guinness is a meal. Guinness is a meal.
Guinness life hack.
Guinness is amazing, especially the closer you get to Ireland. By the time you get to Ireland, holy shit, is that stuff amazing when you get there, when you have it.
Way better than the United States.
No, it is. Sure. It is very important how you pour it. You need to have
some
foam on top.
Cheryl, I'm telling you, I lived in Japan for many years. I drank Guinness hundreds of times in Tokyo, and every time it tasted like a nasty asshole. That's what it tasted like every time.
I used to bartend in New York City, and it does have to do with
I guess you went to Hub, right? You went Hub, right?
No.
Cheap Irish pub, right?
No.
It's irrelevant. All the Guinness outside of Ireland is crap.
It's way overly carbonated in Japan. That's the problem. So
it's yummy.
No, it's not at all yummy. Not at all yummy. No.
It's yummy for me.
That's exactly right. In Japan, Guinness is made in different way than.
Yeah, but yummy. Oishi desu.
No, oishikunayo.
Yeah, it's oishi. However,
You
it's
see,
very
Ken-chan
different.
も言った.
It's very different
Yeah,
than
it's different.
from
It's
Guinness
very different. When you go, let me put
yeah.
it this way: when you go to Ireland, and if you're in the Temple Bar Gate area, where they literally get it directly in the pipes from the factory to the pubs. They don't even put it in
Amen.
fucking kegs. It comes in the pipes
Wow.
to the pubs. When you're in that region, right near the Guinness Brewery, holy shit, does that taste amazing?
Oh my God, that was amazing. I
That's
remember
Well, I'm
that.
gonna
fresh.
Yes.
for those who aren't as lucky as me and Tyler who can go to the Temple Bar. I'm going to give you a life hack when it comes to Guinness. So, Cheryl, I love that you probably think that was a good Guinness, but I'm going to teach you a way to find a good Guinness. So, first thing, I think somebody said it here. I think it was you, Amy. The closer you get to the Guinness factory,
Thank
the
you.
better the Guinness is.
Yep.
However, here's the other hack: if you go into a pub and no one is drinking Guinness in the pub, then get well away from it because it's going to be you're going to be getting something that's
That's
been sitting
true.
in the pub for the last 6 months. But if you go to a pub and loads of people are drinking Guinness, it means that it's been flowing quite well. So don't buy Guinness if you're the first person in the pub to buy it. Go somewhere where everyone else is drinking it, and you'll get yourself a good pint.
And make sure you watch the bartender when they pour it, because the way they pour it as well is how it actually does make it taste even better.
Please tell me
I
please tell me there's a hilarious story of how someone's like tapped off of the underground pipes and
Oh, of course. You
gotten
go.
caught.
Go. They have a what do you call it? A museum at the brewery, and they have all of that. Like there was people, tapping all the pipes all the time.
yeah.
Oh, Chris.
You know what? I because of Guinness, I actually co-own a pub in Kyoto briefly, and I drink Guinness every time I visit them.
We get
Boring.
it, Cheryl. You love your Guinness. Yes.
I'm
Okay.
sure. I'm sure.
Yes.
It tastes absolutely amazing in Japan.
Wait,
So,
but is that 4 Irishmen on stage or 3 Irishmen on stage?
Oh,
Patrick
they
Well,
and
have
let, let
Aaron.
me
both.
let me let me let me let me tell you, if you have anything, any drinks in Kyoto, that's great because it's Kyoto.
Yeah.
But
The
if you're
atmosphere
going to be
makes
drinking in
that.
Kyoto, you want to
Yeah,
get some legit nigiri, some real sake.
Sake. Yes. Sake.
Hey,
yeah. Of course, real sake is great in Kyoto. But if you have really shitty beer in Kyoto,
Yes.
it tastes great because
Yes. You get some
it's in Kyoto.
Asahi. You get
Atmosphere makes the taste
Yes.
different.
You go to an izakaya and drink some really light Japanese beer, some Asahi dry, super dry. That works. That's on a hot summer
Exactly.
day.
That's right. I agree.
I
But
think Ken
But
is.
Ken, you'll agree it has to be super cold on a very hot day. You agree?
Yeah, well, Asahi super dry, super cold, and very hot days. Super.
Yes.
Yeah, my favorite is Ebisu, but you know what
Me
Tyler
too.
Ken
I
is
like
just
Ebby's
trying
too.
to say?
Yeah,
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 that
I
is.
I I, I agree. ABC is very good
that's my favorite.
when it's not
Yeah, my
very
favorite
hot
too.
day,
That's right.
not and
On a
not
Yeah,
regular
very
day.
not
What about
extremely
Ichigo?
cold,
yes.
like
I-
served in
yes.
UK or
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sapporo
Germany.
too.
That's great.
but
When I drink sushi, I like Sapporo. So there
when
you
you
go.
this
Tyler,
is
What about
this is
You
just
drink
going to an
sushi,
Irish pub.
Tyler? How do
This
you
is
Tyler?
an
drink
Irish
sushi?
pub.
Okay, well, wait.
How do you drink sushi, Tyler? I want to know.
Let's stop this, stupid
no, it's
No,
not.
let's keep
It's not
going.
discussion
It
over
not.
reminds me
here.
of home.
You know,
It
How do you
reminds me of
Tyler.
say
home.
how do you say
Tyler, how
nasty
to drink
asshole on
sushi?
Japanese?
In Japan,
Oh,
uh,
Get the clips out.
Mazui. What would be
but
the best slang version? Mazui.
Mazu is oishkunai.
Mazu is real bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think what Ken is really trying to say is any beer in Japan tastes better than the US Budweiser. Thank you.
Well, Tyler would argue, Cheryl. He thinks that Guinness is Buttweiser.
Yeah. Okay. We'll leave it on that terrible flat joke, and we'll go into
Rimshot.
Rimshot here. The MacBook Pros just were announced, and now they've taken out the Touch Bar, and they fixed them all up, and boy, they're super fast. Which is super cool. And we'll get some more, people will start reviewing them in the next couple days, and we'll get to see those and get to see just really how fast they are when they get all the benchmarks in and everything. And now there's a new article on this issue of Apple and their new devices they just announced, which is that Apple confirms its 140 watt charging brick bundled with the 16-inch MacBook Pro uses a USB-C PD 3.1 standard and is the first gallium nitrate charger. So the thing requires a whole lot of juice, 140 watt charging brick through USB-C. So this is a kind of interesting tech that they have to power the new supercharged MacBook Pro 16-inch with those super new processors. Okay. And then what else do we got here? The next biggest story.
Tyler, just 16
Yes.
inch with 2 terabyte is enough for normal people?
Yes, 2 terabytes is plenty for normal people. Yes.
Okay.
Unless if you're doing video editing, and here's the problem: is the newest iPhone. If you have the newest iPhone, it does ProRes recording, and if you're doing ProRes, then 2 terabyte might not be enough actually. But it's
taking up a lot of space.
Yeah, and that really only applies if you're using the new Pro, file format in the newest iPhone 13. Then you'll need a lot of space. Next up is Mac OS Monterey release candidate reintroduces Safari's old tab design and blah, blah, blah. So the new operating system, Monterey, is also coming out in the next few days, almost certainly before the MacBook Pros arrive next week, so that they will come pre-installed with Mac OS Monterey. The next one is Nikkei Japan. Says that they have sources. That means they've got leaks too. Shit. That Google has asked Pixel 6 suppliers, that means people supplying parts for the Pixel 6, like Qualcomm and Broadcom and Toshiba and and Samsung, everyone who makes all the chips and the glass and all that shit for the phones, to produce over 7 million units, double its entire estimated smartphone shipments last year. So they are expecting a blockbuster demand for the Pixel 6. And guess what? The Pixel 6 launch event live from Google HQ starts in just less than 3 hours from now. And we will watch that live stream and that Pixel 6 event. And I suspect as well that this will be the breakthrough year for the Pixel phone, because this is the first time they've got their own system on a chip architecture to take full advantage of the deep, deep investments and R&D they've done into AI, which that's their bread and butter. They're an AI company, you could say, in fact.
I predict the Pixel will go nowhere, but do you want to take a bet, Tyler?
Yeah, I think it's going to sell like hotcakes. It depends on the price, but I think they're going to be able to add new functionality that's going to make people start to turn away from the iPhone.
I'm with Tyler on this.
Take that
I think Tyler's correct.
I think the system on a chip architecture with Google Assistant will enable new functionality and features of Google Assistant that do not exist in any other device.
I agree, but I also agree that I believe their market share will be unchanged in 1 year from now. Thanks.
Okay.
But where are you based? Coming with that? Are you in America?
I'm basing on they don't have the reach when it comes to global mobile telephony versus the giants, and that's never changed. 10 years they've been trying to crack the code, and they haven't yet on smartphones.
I think I'm with Tyler on this one, actually. And the reason I think that is because the thing that impresses me most about Apple is that they control both the hardware and the software on their device. And actually, I was a big fan of the Microsoft Lumia devices for that same reason, that the hardware and software was run by the same organization. I think this is where Samsung lets itself down. And I think this is where Google, whenever they bought over Motorola handsets, that they would get their shit together. And it hasn't really happened for them. But I think this may be I think this could be it. Because whenever Android came out, I thought this is not going to do much. What is Google going to do with that? And obviously they own the market share by a long stretch. And I think they have the reach on the software. And if their hardware can back it up, then they can make it happen. That's my thought, and I'm excited for this actually. And I've never bought a Pixel.
Yeah, that's the point. I mean, it's exciting, but are you going to buy that device And if you want to succeed in mobile, you got to have a family of flagship products and low end, medium, high end. You need all the carrier relationships. They just never crack the code, but it'll be fun to watch.
Well,
It would be the first time that I'd be tempted to buy it, actually. Honestly, I would be tempted for sure.
Well, bunch of my friends and we all bought i13 and we are underwhelmed greatly and already looking forward to 14. And Google is, I don't know, maybe catching up, but iPhone is not doing a bunch of invention or new tech kind of stuff. So they are kind of lagging behind, in my opinion.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, but they continue to kill it when it
well,
comes to like
you
numbers and sales.
you could be right, Evan, in that they're only saying 7 million units is that they're telling the suppliers to be ready for, which is
That's
double what they
peanut.
did before. That's still
How many?
peanuts. Yeah,
How many probably sells that in a day?
right. Yeah, so that's still peanuts.
But Samsung probably sells that in a minute.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And I would rather be on an Android, because I use Android. I would rather use an Android device which is all the way through. Like I would rather have the same hardware and software sort of merged together the way that Apple does it. For me, it's just that Apple have always been underwhelming when it comes to phones, and I have only ever used iPhone when I've been given one with work. And even at that, I've still always used an Android device as my daily driver because it's a superior product. I'm using, I think it's the Note 21 at the moment, or Note 20, Samsung, which is the flagship, and it's a way superior device than any of the iPhones that's in the market. If iPhone ever trumped it and made something better, I would jump to what was best. But I'm always looking for what is best, and I think hopefully Google are getting their shit together now, and their hardware and software can come together and provide a real premium device. Um, for me, I'm not price sensitive when it comes to phones, because no matter how much it costs, it's still cheap for me because I use it for everything from running to meditation to meetings to business. Like I use it for everything. So even if it was $10,000, I would still get my value out of it over the space of a year.
Oh yeah, this no doubt this is going to be a geek's phone. I mean, it's going to be a wonderful geeky product, but that doesn't change their position in the market.
Yeah, and
Apple's a set.
the ease of having your AirPods, your phone, your watch, your big,
It's
the
ecosystem.
laptop and
Apple.
everything.
Google hasn't built that ecosystem of all the devices.
That's what I'm saying.
Apple's a what I call a center mass company, meaning they're really aiming for the center mass. And with the change in the ad infrastructure and the tracking,
That
Apple's going heavy on ads and their
yeah,
new
but
ecosystem.
but
So
I'll debate this point with you, Evan, that Apple does very well on the personal hardware ecosystem. Google focuses more on embedding Google Assistant into all the car companies, for example, the TVs, for example, other
Oh
device,
yeah,
right?
and iOS. The best developer on iOS is Google. I mean, look at Google Maps, et cetera, et cetera. So,
Yeah, but
and
what I
and
mean
the
is,
other,
the in the same way that Apple uses its AirPods and its watches to try and capture market share and entice people over to the Apple ecosystem, and it works brilliantly. They're attracting people over with hardware. Google's doing kind of a different strategy where they're using their Google Assistant is starting to gain in the foot race against Siri, and I think that's what we're going to see in this event 3 hours from now. They're going to showcase Google Assistant in a new way with that it's going to have new functionality due to the system on
yeah,
a
and
chip.
I hope they port that to iOS so I can use Google Assistant
Yeah,
on
because
iOS.
honestly,
It's awesome.
as a dedicated Apple user on almost all my products, I use phone and laptop, but I for my home speakers I do use Google Home and Google Assistant enabled devices, because when I'm doing smart home stuff like turn the lights off this, turn the lights on that, and blah 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 blah. For me, the Google Assistant ecosystem is better across all the other hardware manufacturers, like the lights and the etc. So it, yeah, and then
Siri is terrible in that realm. I have, I
right, that's my
mentioned
point.
yesterday,
They
I'm a
also bought
HomePod guy, but it is terrible.
they also bought Nest and the thermostats and the cameras, and that's where Apple's notably it would be fantastic if Apple got into the cameras and the thermostats, and but they're so focused on controlling everything. I'm not I don't expect it'll come anytime soon. So anyway, the next one is that it is Apple debuts third generation AirPods with updated design, better sound quality, spatial audio, and Apple Music and MagSafe enabled case, available next week. To me, it looks very similar to the AirPod Pros, but without the annoying little thing in your ear.
Well, that little thing is not annoying for me. That's comfortable.
I don't like the sensation of being blocked out like that. So
But keeps it in your ear. It's not falling out just like my older one. I lost
True.
3 of them, but this
True.
one is staying.
So then we get into the next one, and here's where things get a little bit spicy. So the next one is, and by the way, for those who don't know, this daily list that I have is not of my own making. I read the literally top down based on most popular to least popular. It's not my source. It's an external source, which Cheryl somehow found out, or somebody told Cheryl the source, and I've not shared it, so somebody figured it out. So I think I'm going to figure out who told you, Cheryl. So be careful. So it says, now watch this. Let's unpack this slowly. The next one is from Vice, and the headline says Facebook posts an odd thread, meaning a Twitter thread, attacking 30 unnamed journalists. Okay, now let's see if Facebook is actually attacking journalists in their Twitter thread. Hold that thought in your head. That's claim number one. There's a claim by Vice that Facebook is attacking 30 unnamed journalists. Okay, let's see if that ends up to be true. You decide for yourself. Well, let's read it and you see. And then attacking 30 plus unnamed journalists, quote unquote, finishing up a coordinated series of articles based on thousands of pages of leaked documents. Okay, now here's the Twitter thread. Now, it's not that long of a thread. It's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tweets. And let's see if Facebook's attacking these 30 journalists. Here's tweet number 1 of the 5. We expect the press to hold us accountable, given our scale and role in the world. But when reporting misrepresents our actions and motivations, we believe we should correct the record. Number 2, over the last 6 weeks, including over the weekend, we've seen how documents can be mischaracterized. Obviously, not every employee at Facebook is an executive. Not every opinion is the company's position. Obviously, there's a whole lot of documents in the whole Facebook ecosystem. You've got 100,000 employees all having multiple meetings a day, all preparing documents for all those meetings. Everything written in all of those documents are not the official statements of Facebook. Those are the employees debating shit internally, much of which could be jackass buffoonery. And yet those documents get leaked, and journalists cherry pick out some of that choice grade A USDA choice jackass buffoonery and then position it as Facebook says XYZ because Bobby the janitor said something stupid in a meeting 3 years ago. That's what's happening. And that's why Facebook had to write this Twitter thread. And then tweet number 3. Right now, 30 plus journalists are finishing up a coordinated series of articles based on thousands of pages of leaked documents. We hear that to get the docs outlets, meaning publishers, had to agree to conditions and a schedule laid down by the PR team that worked on the earlier leaked docs, which means the Wall Street Journal, that's who the team who worked on the earlier leaked docs. And what they're doing now, and what Facebook is saying, is they've become aware that the Wall Street Journal is now inviting in all of their journalistic friends to join in a jihad against Facebook. Right? And to do that, they must use this technique called a embargo, which simply means we're all agreeing to the minute and date and time which we will attack. So no one's going to jump ahead. We're all going to release simultaneously, usually at the top of the hour on some set day and time, noon New York's time, or 9 a.m. Pacific, October 28th. No one goes 1 minute early. If you jump the gun, then you lose a whole lot of trust from your journalistic friends. This is called doing an embargo. This happens all the time in the tech game, all the time. The majority of press articles in the tech world use this methodology. So this is no big deal. This happens countless times a day. So so Facebook is saying, we now have heard that they're working on this big campaign, 30 different journalists, and the Wall Street Journal is now inviting in all of their friendly competitors who compete. And why would they do that? Well, that's an interesting question, because it's no longer about, killing the, capturing the zebra and eating it all yourself. You're willing to split it up amongst 30 other journalists because this is not about money. This is about revenge. This is about attack. This is about inflicting as much damage as possible to your bigger shared mutual opponent, because all of these journalists' publications are all losing in the ad revenue battle to Facebook. This is the arch enemy. This is the king of the jungle. And so they're all uniting to inflict as much possible damage. The jackals and hyenas are all going to get together and take down the water buffalo. So the last tweet, the curated selection out of millions of documents at Facebook can in no way be used to draw fair conclusions about us at Facebook. Internally, we share work in progress, which is unfinished, and debate options, totally unformed opinions in all of these documents that are not the official statements of Facebook. Not every suggestion stands up to the scrutiny we must apply to decisions affecting so many people. Last tweet, to those news organizations who would like to move beyond an orchestrated gotcha campaign, we are ready to engage on the substance. John Panett, VP of Communications. End of tweet stream. End of tweet stream. Now, did John Panett, VP of Communications, did he just attack 30 journalists, as Vice says in their headline? No, he didn't. So what the fuck's going on, Vice? You just told me Facebook post an odd thread. No, there ain't nothing odd about that thread at all. That thread is many things, but odd is not one of them. There's nothing odd about that thread. Facebook posts an odd thread attacking 30 unnamed journalists. Huh? What thread did you read, Vice? I just read the thread. We all just read the thread. Does anyone on this stage think that Facebook just attacked these journalists?
I think the thread certainly tries to reframe the argument. So the journalists are trying to, I believe, present facts that were presented within Facebook. And so the argument really is about, are the facts, are they real? I mean, is the data that's being presented, is that a true reflection of
Jonathan,
the impact that it has?
Great.
I think what Facebook would
That's
like,
right.
and certainly these tweets are like, these are opinions.
Right.
These aren't facts.
Well,
actually, I don't care how many presentations have been released within Facebook. Some of them might be Looney Tunes, but if there are facts in there that are accurate and a true representation of the damage Facebook does, then yes, I want to know about it.
Right. And what if you were a journalist at a prestigious publication who's built their reputation over centuries on legitimate journalism, when presented with documents about a company, you would then reach out to the company and say, hey, somebody just leaked some documents from within your organization who may not even work at the
company. I agree with you. That Tyler, so checking your source and checking your facts. But also, I haven't really seen Facebook engaging in a way of trying to refute individual facts. What they want to do is they want to present another presentation with their own interpretation of the facts. Facts are facts. Numbers are numbers. Yeah. So I think look, there's sort of, wrongs and rights on both sides, but having all of this information, if you like, this dirty washing out, so we can all look at it and hopefully not be too swayed by the press, but form our own opinions as to whether, Facebook or other social media companies have a positive or negative impact on our lives. I think that's very important, and I think it's necessary.
Right. So my point I'm trying to make essentially is, I would hope that they stay true to the journalistic pedigree and heredity that they were founded on and built on, and engage with Facebook when they find documents. In the case of Frances Haugen, the one interesting document that came out thus far was the slide about a survey, a very non-scientific survey, mind you,
Yeah.
of how Instagram users feel
And
Instagram affecting them. And the Wall Street Journal published not the document itself, but one of the data points on one slide of the document, which, because the Wall Street Journal didn't publish the document in their piece, Facebook said, "Oh, you must be talking about this page of this document, and we would love to explain this entire document so you understand the full content." It was actually Facebook who published the document, not the Wall Street Journal, because the facts supported Facebook when you took the document as a whole in the whole context, and counter the rest of the data points on that document countered the narrative that the Wall Street Journal was pushing in their journalistic jihad.
which was in your mind, Tyler? What was the balance there? That actually a young girl having a negative image of herself, or in that sort of, if you like, counterbalanced by other young people feeling better about themselves.
Yeah, to be very
I mean,
specific.
is that what we're talking about here? Because
Well, I could tell you exactly what we're talking. We just need to look at the slide, which we did do previously, and they asked young guys and young girls separately, and then of the young lady, all the guys said they asked them about 10 on each side. They asked 10 questions to guys, the same 10 questions to girls, and they said, "Does Instagram make you feel better or worse, or somewhere between, no change, better or worse about yourself with regard to your financial well-being?" Both sides, men and young guys and girls, both said, "Makes me feel better." Okay. Does it make you feel better or worse or neutral about your self-image as it relates to your family stress? Makes them both feel better. Okay, great. How about this and this and that? They went through 10 on each side. 9 out of all the guys, they claimed, the guys who answered the survey
Yeah,
said,
but Tyler, I'm
yes,
sorry to pull you up on this.
yes.
Those are like meaningless
No,
metrics. Do
not at
I
all.
feel better about my own financial and family circumstance
Right,
because I use social media?
right.
Does social media make me feel alone? Does social
Yes, that's what they
media give
asked.
me
Does
a
it make you
negative
feel alone? And the
self-body
girl said
image?
no. It makes me feel better
But
about
Tyler,
about loneliness.
but Tyler, these are far more. These are far more emotional questions. Okay, and we're getting answers that are giving us a huge emotional response. I don't think children. Does social media make you feel bad about the car you drive? Does social media mean that you should buy Levi as opposed to Lee jeans? They're fucking meaningless. What's important here is, do you come out with this negative self-image? And I have two daughters, and I'm
Well,
very worried about
you're
social media and the
fundamentally
effect.
misunderstanding what's going on here, Jonathan. The 10 questions that they asked the girls were, does it make you feel better or worse about yourself in these 10 categories? Your body image, your financial well-being, your overall stress, your family life, your friend's life. 9 of the 10, the girl said, it makes me feel better about myself.
Yes, but what are the questions? If the
I just
question is
told
my
you what the questions were,
financial,
Jonathan. Would you like me to repeat them?
so which is the question where they feel negative about themselves? Just tell
Body
me that
self,
question.
specifically only one.
Exactly, which
Body
has the most
self-image.
emotional impact on a young girl, Tyler, not the financial element.
That's
Young
fine. I
girls are
have no
driven by
problem with
how
that.
they're looked and how they are
So,
perceived and
Jonathan,
seen.
so you as a journalist see this slide that the girl, by the way, all the young boys all said, all 10, I feel better about myself by using Instagram. My own self-image, on all 10 out of 10, I feel better. The young girls, 9 out of 10, their own self-image, they feel better. On one of the
As a young
10,
boy, I can only speak for myself. When I was a young boy, if someone said, "Hey, you're ugly," or "You have spots," or "You have," it didn't have. I imagine, certainly I can see from my daughters, as much an impact as if someone says the same thing to my daughter. So I don't see this information. Again, it's about changing the context. Oh yeah, overall we asked like 1,000 questions, most of them fucking meaningless to your emotional well-being, and 99 or 999 of them basically said, hey, we are a positive influence in people's lives. But the one that actually has real meaning, yeah, actually we are a detriment. Come on, Tyler, man.
No, come on, Jonathan. All 10 that they asked the guys, so all guys said Instagram makes them feel better about their self-image on finance, their physical health, their family well-being, how their work life, their friendships, all of them. The girls also, all of them with one exception. How it makes their own body self-image. Now, here's the important part.
Should we ask a lady, because we're both not ladies? Why don't we ask the ladies in the
No,
room?
you're fundamentally missing
About
the
how
point,
important
Jonathan.
their self-image
Jonathan,
is to them.
you're fundamentally missing the point here. The point is, the journalist saw that slide that we're talking about. And instead of saying, hey, Facebook did a survey to find out how their young users feel about themselves as a result of using Instagram. Instead of mentioning, as a journalist would do, we saw the slide, and out of all young guys feel better about themselves, and the young girls, out of 9 out of 10 issues about how they feel about themselves, Instagram makes them feel better. And in the one case of body self-image, they felt less. They didn't do this, Jonathan. They didn't include all of what I just told you. They wrote the headline.
What is Instagram? What is Instagram? It's about images. It's predominantly about images of yourself. I hardly see any images about banks.
Doesn't really matter. You're going off the track here. The point is, the journalist didn't do journalism. The journalist did activism. The journalist took the one data point. There's 10 data points on each side. There's a total of 20
Tyler,
data
I've already
points.
agreed with you there that I agree that there needs to be some balance here. But I'm saying we're moving into a very dangerous world where Facebook will provide context by asking a load of meaningless questions in order to provide balance to their argument. Yes, we have a slightly negative impact on body, on self-worth and body image. But hey, look at all these other metrics that we recorded. It's meaningless. It's meaningless background
Well,
noise.
you could say all 10 on each side are meaningless.
From a
You
father's
can't.
perspective with 2 daughters, I don't care about that because it's an emotional thing for me to see how driven
Here it is.
my daughters are by the images
Here,
that they see
here are
online,
here
and
are
how
the
they
10.
see perfect images that don't reflect reality.
Here's the 10 that they asked. Did that make you feel, made it worse, made it better, or no impact? Family stress, financial stress, sadness, anxiety, loneliness, sleep issues, eating issues, social comparison, fear of missing out, body image, and problematic use. And it makes them feel better about their family stress, their financial stress, their sadness, their anxiety, their loneliness, their sleep issues, their eating issues, their social comparison, their problematic use, their fear of missing out, but not their body image.
Okay, surely if you feel bad about your body image, that translates potentially into eating disorders.
No,
So
because one
I
of the
don't know.
questions
They
was
seem to be
eating
slightly
issues, Jonathan.
counterfactual or contradictory. Tyler.
One of the other questions they ask is eating issues. It makes them feel better about their eating issues.
I'm sorry, Tyler. I mean, maybe this is sort of an emotional response for me, but I'm sorry. To be honest,
It's
I look at
certainly
social
not a
media and
logical
I see
response from you.
Facebook and I see how we are driven by no one takes a fucking picture when they're crying. Very few. Yeah, we all take the pictures when we're on a private plane or we've just had our hair done. Or we look absolutely fabulous. Or
My
we
friend, you're
use
rambling.
TikTok
Here's
or
the point. You're
Snapchat
getting off the
filters.
point again. The Facebook data that they're cherry picking from specifically shows in the chart that in the survey, young ladies feel better after using Instagram as it relates to sadness, anxiety, loneliness, sleep issues, eating issues, fear of missing out, problematic social comparison, but not body image. And they ignored all of that and just ran the headline, Facebook knows that Instagram users is leading to body negative self-image, mentioning not at all, zero, not even once, any of the other 9 things that they responded that it actually improves for them.
Tyler.
Is that journalism, Jonathan?
Negative body self.
Yes.
I'm sorry if I had a negative image of myself, I would be conscious about the way I looked, the way I ate, who saw me, what environment I was seen in. I mean, again, all of these points are sort of contradictory. And I get what you're saying. I understand the piece around about sort of negative reporting from the press and a feeding frenzy, and Facebook's the enemy. But we don't get a representation of reality through social media. What we get is a representation of how we want the
I
world
don't
to know.
care. That's not my point. My point is journalists are on a jihad, and they don't care about the facts, as you said.
Well, in this
Tyler?
particular
You hear
case,
this?
Tyler?
That's the Wall Street
with
Journal
social
jihad
media.
going on over there. They
Tyler.
got the Wall Street Journal jihad. We're gonna go. Let's go kill the infidels over at Facebook. That's what's going on, Jonathan.
Tyler.
That's the
Okay,
fucking point, my
That was
friend.
brilliant.
take a
Tyler.
Time's
breath.
up. Time's up. Next article,
Take a
Tyler.
deep breath. Let's move on to the
Tyler.
next
Come
topic.
I
on.
They're on a journalistic jihad. They
Tyler.
don't care about the facts. Facebook had to show the slide. Facebook showed the slide. They couldn't. Why couldn't they? Because the slide counteracts the false narrative they're trying to create. That's why they couldn't show the slide. They would have loved to show the slide, but they couldn't because they were intentionally removing the bulk of the context of the slide because they were cherry picking the data. That's why Wall Street Journal couldn't show the slide. And that's why Facebook themselves were very happy to show the slide because the data on the slide, the data, Jonathan, that you're so fond of, the facts, Jonathan, that you're so fond of, are on Facebook's side. That's why they were happy to show the facts, and the Wall Street Journal was intentionally trying to
No, the
redact
facts
the
I look
facts.
at, Tyler, is about sort of self-worth and body image.
So if the
That's the thing
facts
that
are
I
so
look
much
at,
on the
and
side of
that's
the Wall
the
Street Journal, why
yeah,
couldn't they
yeah.
show the slide, Jonathan?
And okay, maybe, but that is disastrous. It's indicting in its own right. Okay,
And who
And
and
benefits
it
don't
turns
see
this
out
that
it's
slide,
narrative?
not.
then
It
we have
turns
a
out it's
different
not at
point of
all.
view.
It
Who
turns out it's
benefits
not at
from
all
this
because the
narrative?
people who did this survey know diddly nothing about the psychology of surveys and the science of surveys. NPR itself did a
You
piece highlighting
yeah,
how
Tyler,
unscientific and how meaningless a survey
Tyler,
is
you
when
do
you ask a
realize that
user
Facebook
to
has the
express how
most
they
number of
think
clinical
something makes them
psychologists
feel.
on its
It's utterly
payroll.
unscientific and it means
Tyler,
scientifically
Facebook has
fucking
the most
zero.
number of clinical psychologists on its payroll. Why? Because they want to make the most addictive
It could be. But the
social
person
media
who did, here's
experience
the
on the
point,
planet.
Jonathan. The person who did this survey is not a clinical psychologist and is not a researcher and knows
And where
nothing
did
about
they
how to
get the
collect
facts
research.
from, Tyler? Where did they get the data from? Is the
They
data
they did a
tainted?
survey of their users and the users
Okay.
responded to the survey and then Sally from
So it's
the
accurate
team.
data.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
data. It's a survey. They sent out a survey. The people responded to the survey. The
Okay,
person
it's
who's not
still
a
accurate
researcher
data.
made a
It's still
slide
accurate
and shared
data.
it in a meeting.
But the real question, Tyler, who benefits from this narrative of the Wall Street Journal?
The Wall Street Journal.
Or a competitor?
True.
Yeah, no one's talking
But Wall
about
Street Journal
TikTok.
is a
If it
competitor. They're
really,
competing with Facebook for
yeah,
ad dollars.
There's
Okay,
yeah.
the
yes.
last time the
If
competitor are benefiting from this.
And this is the other problem is the Wall Street Journal is not, as they should be doing, as a direct competitor with Facebook for ad dollars. That's their main revenue stream is directly competitive with Facebook. They're not saying, by the way, in full transparency, we're a direct competitors with this company that we have this jihad against. And more importantly, they didn't do the thing that you agree they should have done, which is call up Facebook and say, hey, somebody sent us a document from Instagram who doesn't even fucking work at Instagram. And we're not sure exactly what we're looking at. We think we understand it. Could you please help make a comment? We're going to publish this tomorrow. Could you please make a comment about this? That's journalism. That's what they were taught to do. They didn't do that. And the tweet thread that the Facebook's head of VP of communications put out, where he says to those news organizations who would like to move beyond an orchestrated gotcha campaign, we are ready to engage on the substance. And he's saying that knowing they're not going to reach out to him because they're not interested in doing journalism. They're on a fucking journalistic jihad. They're trying to fucking kill the infidels over at Facebook. This has nothing to do with journalism whatsoever. It's the Wall Street jihad. That's the point, Jonathan. You get it now?
Tyler.
Do you get it now?
But the point
Okay,
is this as well: journalism has become activism, and that's not what their training set them up for. And Tyler, I'm with you on it.
within reason. I mean, yes, I get that there are people who have, very pointed angle. And then I have friends that I've known for decades who are completely committed to doing journalism the right way. They've been embedded with, in the most dangerous of situations, in the middle of, horrific conditions, simply to bring us the news. So I really, I'm not a journalist, but I think we need to kind of chill out, you know, in characterizing an entire profession as being somehow unethical. Yes, there are people that kind of go off and they do their own thing and they have agendas, but I would love to invite some of my journalist friends to this stage so that you really, really see the commitment that they have to bringing an objective point of view to the work that they do. Okay, we've
I
dead,
just
shall
find it
we?
interesting how we, so whether it's sort of reporting right or wrong, whether reporters are ganging up, we're just focusing now on reporters ganging up against Facebook, but actually not on the data. And that one data point about sort of self-worth, self-image, I mean,
Not
it's a disaster. That's a disaster for
self
Facebook.
body
And that's
image.
where
Yes.
that self-body image, Jesus, I mean, I don't know, again, ladies, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I imagine that's one of the most important things, for a woman, how she
But
views
but
herself
but
and how
That's
she's
Jonathan,
Yeah,
viewed
but
by
that's
other
totally
women.
John,
irrelevant.
John,
John,
last
if you
time
look at the
was
if
that
you look at the
self-body image is
data,
also being affected by magazines, by TV shows, by so many other things, and
Yeah,
it's not
Tyler.
only,
it,
This
but
goes
you
back to
know,
Barbies.
but
only
but
thing.
John,
I
Yes,
John,
goes back
agree
to
that
John,
Barbie,
this is
goes
this is
back to the
pervasive
Tyler
through all of our
thing.
media, but
John.
two wrongs don't make it
But
right. You know
Jonathan,
what I
you
mean?
you
Just
fund
because
you have
someone
to.
else is doing it.
I don't want to have to read you the NPR article from the research psychologist who clearly says asking a young lady what she thinks Instagram makes her feels means nothing. That data point means nothing. That they responded to say that they think Instagram makes them feel worse about it.
Holy shit! Then what do the other data
Tyler, can
points
we
mean,
bring up
Tyler?
Dr. Fran?
They
She's
also,
an
Jonathan,
important.
that's very easy to answer. They also mean nothing. That's what the NPR interview with the professional psychological researcher says. So
So
why didn't the journalist do the proper work to make that point out? Well, because that doesn't fit their jihad narrative against Facebook. That
Tyler,
shit means
can
it's
we bring
useless.
up Dr. Fran? She's a PhD from NYU in psychiatric occupational therapy.
Sure.
So I
And
think,
why is it just Facebook that is like the target here always?
Yeah, I mean, you would target TikTok if you were really concerned about your
Yeah,
children.
no, I agree with
yeah,
that.
And
That
then
sentiment, I
and
definitely
then the other
agree
part,
with.
Jonathan,
Because TikTok
I
is
have
not an
two
ad network that's competing with the Wall Street
exactly
Journal.
the point. I have
Concentrate
three
on
very young
Barbies,
children. I'm
concentrate on all
intimately
the
concerned
other,
with this.
long
Tyler,
established.
Tyler, I have two daughters and a PhD in communications, and I taught college journalism. There is an entire, and this is a very complicated issue, and you two guys have oversimplified it un, almost unbelievably. For one thing, there is something that happens to women, girls at age 14, which there's a whole book called Reviving Ophelia, written about how to raise adolescent girls because of body image issues that are baked into the culture from way before Instagram, so that these girls have these problems. When a girl gets up to the age of about 14, they quit raising their hand in class. They quit trying to look smart because they
Ah.
think that boys won't love them if they look smart. So that's one thing from that book.
I agree.
The other thing that happens is, of course, that they want to look attractive. This is all way before Instagram. And we can argue and argue whether Instagram makes it worse or doesn't make it
We
worse.
don't know.
But we,
I presented the
well,
same
it
argument
predates
last time.
Instagram by thousands of years.
Right. I agree.
Yeah, body image issues are inherently associated with the growth.
Right.
But would you, Dr. Francine and others, I mean women here on in the channel, would you agree that sort of body image is a very important thing for well, for all of us, but
It's
certainly sort of for
major.
women?
It's major. I'm 80 and I still have body image issues. And mostly, it's many more women than men, but body image is major, and there's so many studies on it. But I mean, arguing whether the Wall Street Journal. Now I'm going to give you the journalism piece, arguing whether the Wall Street Journal is activist or not is an argument that the profession of journalism is having now, because for years in journalism schools we taught there's this one side and then there's this other side, and we were taught to be objective and do one side and then the other side.
I agree.
Well, then what has happened is things have changed to the point where in the United States, one side is putting out misinformation, and if journalists don't correct it, no one will. So that's a whole other that's a whole other question, and it's a too big a question, I think, for this room, because there have to be journalists in the room and there have to be psychologists in the room. This would be a very interesting conference to have on, women's body image in the age of social media, but it's a multidisciplinary, and it kind of made me laugh, Tyler, and I love you, but it kind of made me laugh to see two men discussing it, and and no women even getting a word in edgewise. It was
Do with body
pretty damn.
self-image. My argument has to do with the atrocious lack of journalism being applied in this jihad that the Wall Street Journal has against Facebook. And by the way, then they did it a few days later on a separate, very and they did the exact same jihad strategy of journalistic terrorism on a totally separate issue just 3 days ago, where they said they chose another one little tiny little section of a much bigger page in a much bigger document
Okay, that's
about
And
hate
Tyler,
speech.
you're
The
right,
next one,
We
and
can
I love
all
your
hold
point.
on.
This
agree
is
that
why I come
Don't
on the
more
channel.
I
objective
But
agree
I
with
still
you.
have to point out, I don't
representation.
really care about the journalistic argument, to be
Well,
honest.
that's what we're
As a
talking
father
about
with
here,
two
Jonathan.
daughters
So
I
if you don't want to talk about that, you need to go back to the audience, buddy, because that's what the conversation's about here. So
Whose dog
I
is
want to
that?
talk about the
the
journalistic
the point, the
argument,
next
and
article that they
then we have
did
to go.
in their jihad was that the AIs are only removing 3 to 5% of the hate speech on Facebook. That's the second article they came out with it in a very similar way, and it was the exact same strategy. And Facebook had to come out again on this happened on Sunday. So today's Tuesday. So 48 hours ago, Wall Street Journal goes, new document. Here it is. Facebook's AI is only removing 3 to 5% of hate speech on Facebook. That's the big
And
headline.
that is an issue. That is an issue related to the business model of journalism right now,
Well, here's the problem.
because journalists are
Agree.
being forced to become activists because that's what gets the
But
clicks.
here's the
And
problem.
that's the
Right.
problem.
You're right. The problem is by doing that, by making the headline that the AI is only removing 3 to 5% of hate speech, Facebook very quickly responded and says, we see what you're doing now. You're taking tiny little comments by some tiny person at our company whose opinions we totally disagree with, by the way, and that 3 to 5% that this somebody in the, that one small team of that they're removing 3 to 5% of hate speech implies that they're not removing the 95% of hate speech. And Facebook says that's totally mischaracterizing what's happening. We remove 99.95% of hate speech on Facebook, but we don't use AI to do it. We have dozens of tools for removing hate speech on Facebook. AI is not our main tool for removing hate speech on Facebook. So when you, the Wall Street Journal, take something out of context that you know nothing about and you don't reach out to us and ask us, hey, what's the real context here? We see this data point where this AI person says you're only removing, that AI is only able to remove 3 to 5% of hate speech on Facebook. We say, who cares? We're not really dependent on AI in removing it. We have lots of other tools. It's a non-issue. There's not a whole lot of hate speech on Facebook. Facebook has tons of issues. Hate speech isn't really one of them. There's a lot of people leaving Facebook. Hate speech is not the reason people are leaving Facebook. So, journalists, when you go out and you write these hit pieces based on misunderstandings of how these tools and how these slides operate within our Facebook ecosystem, you're misinforming the populace and your readers into thinking that we're not removing hate speech on Facebook. And you're misinforming them to think that we're causing young ladies to have a negative body self-image.
Well, let's figure out how. I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying that we have to figure out how to fix this, and to me, how to fix it as a person who's been a communications professional
Right.
all her life. To my mind, the way you fix it is by better communication on Facebook's part,
Right. And that's
and
right.
that is something I have accused them of from the get go.
Right. So
But this discussion has
so
has
who
worn me
who
out.
so who's
Uh, do you
Dr.
have a
Francine, you're
gong or
so
some sort
cool.
of Zen sound effect? I think we all need to take 3 deep breaths. Because...
I can run a
No,
quick
no, no,
check
no, no.
right
That's like
now.
a
Take a
fight
deep
bell.
breath through your nose and exhale through your mouth.
That would
Breathe
To-
and drink
work.
some water, Tyler.
Totally, Cheryl. Totally. We just need to breathe. Not the end of the world.
No, that's like round
Yeah.
round
Yes.
8. We need something that's like
well
boom.
our most important legacy publications, journalistic publications like the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, abandoning and ruining their hard-earned reputations over decades to do a jihad journalism. That is a problem. That is a huge problem. They're spreading misinformation and fear in a systematic way. I would say that is a problem.
I think they are cornered. They are just financially motivated at this point.
Yes.
Hey, Tyler.
Yes.
I have some breaking
Go ahead.
news, if it's okay to transition for a moment. And thank you for all the voices in this room. It's been, as the mom of 2 teenagers, it's been very interesting to hear everyone's perspectives and for how respectful everyone always is here. I appreciate that, even though things get heated every now and then. FDA just announced their proposed new new guidance on distinction between hearing aid and devices that will augment hearing. So basically what we've been talking about over the last week or so, I think it's been, regarding the over-the-counter indications for augmented hearing support. And I won't pretend to be an expert on all things hearing, but I have been tracking this because I have such a so many personal stories about access to hearing support and hearing assistive devices that can fall outside what has been the monopoly that's been around for many years. So I did tweet it, I did tag Tech News Around the World, so you can read for yourself the difference between the definitions of existing hearing devices and the um, over-the-counter hearing aids or hearing assistive devices. I think it will mean a lot to Apple, uh, Google, and others who are embedding these sorts of technologies into their tech.
Right, and it's a blow to the legacy. And this is an interesting preview into how Apple and Google and Amazon are going to destroy the medical system, because the medical system, similar to the same similar thing is happening in defense, where the Department of Defense, and the same thing's happening with SpaceX, where you had these legacy providers to these entrenched industries where they had all of this cronyism lock-in, where they had these insane prices for rockets to launch satellites. They had this insane prices to provide defense at the borders. They have this insane pricing in the medical space, which, by the way, Europeans, if you spend any time living in Europe, they write articles regularly laughing their fucking asses off at how fucking stupid Americans are for how much they pay for the shit that they're buying the same shit at a tenth of the cost, because we have a broken, inflated, bloated system. And if the tech gets to get in there and have a fair fight, Apple's going to make hearing aids, and Amazon and Google, all of them will make competitive products that are better technologically at a tenth of the price. And now you're getting a preview of what's about to fucking happen. They're going to do to the medical industry what SpaceX did to the fucking space industry.
Woohoo! Happy.
Well, Tyler, I had to explain this to somebody. The problem is the regulatory process, and Anna Marie will tell you, is structurally flawed in how you do it. So, for example, if you have a brand new product, meaning you actually innovate a new indication, a new cure, you have to go through a arduous process to get it cleared. The second you clear it, your competitor can do what's called a 510K directly off of it and be in business the next day. And that's the big challenge. It takes the carrot away from any device manufacturer and moves you into a status quo where you're not looking at improving the care of delivery. You're just looking at maximum extraction of value out of whatever asset you've created. And that's the part that's bad, because it hurts patients in the long run.
Chris, that's not flawed, that's specifically curated.
So,
How do you mean? I mean, I agree with what Chris just said. I want to follow what you were saying there.
Me or Iram?
Ibram.
So just like the insurance system and a lot of industries related to healthcare, which are very heavy into policy making, how they support, how they finance all these policies to keep the system intact. So bunch of people are benefiting and profiting, and that's why the healthcare system is in the shape it is now, as I think we all know that.
I see. I think she's agreeing, Chris. Or she was just stating it a little bit differently. But it is a challenge, and I mean, I'll be curious to hear when people have a chance to digest. It's actually not a terribly long proposed rule, and it is open for comment. But I was, because you read the like press release version of it, and you're like, woohoo! Even the playing field, more options. Over the counter indication is a brand new thing for the hearing space, and I was viewing it as this all sunny side, right? Like it was all on the upside. And as I read it, I was like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, my my sort of lobbyist eyes reviewing it could see how the existing industry definitely had a hand in some of how this language is written in the proposed rule.
yep.
And there are some very, in my view, pretty restrictive pieces of language in there around what companies like, I'll just use Apple as the example, it doesn't matter who it is, but someone is looking for this to fall under this OTC non-medical device. Indicate like you can't claim any of the things that we just talked about, right? Like you can't claim to be a device that, like, oh, we could tell if your hearing, for instance, is declining, or the data points we've talked about, these earbuds or other devices being able to pull to that could detect any number of things that are health related. If, as I read it on the first pass, a lot of that's off the table. So I don't know. I'm going to have to digest it a little more, but I encourage others to do so that are interested in how this is going to play out.
Yeah, at the end of the day, a lot of it comes down to lobbying and regulation. Unfortunately, in the U.S., in China, it sure as hell doesn't. But they have their own bizarre version of that. But it's interesting to see how regulations can change, open up new players into new markets, and the reclassification of them. I mean, Uber essentially was predicated on this whole concept of like driver, employee, not the holy cow. They're still debating it on a state by state basis. It gets quite you think you're a startup. You imagine you started Uber. You think you're going to go into that. You're a tech company. No, you end up being a legal company. You end up being your biggest expense is fucking lawyers more than anything. It turns into this mass lobbying, political. You're barely a tech company at all. You're a bureaucratic, it just gets ridiculous. It's not at all what a lot of entrepreneurs think they're going to get themselves into. Anna Marie, I imagine you are sensing that as well. You're building your device for children, and you thought, oh, I'm a hardware company. No, you're a freaking legal company, because you've got to do this crazy political legal dance around IP and patents and red tape and bureaucracy. It never ends.
Well, and
Regulatory affairs.
if it was just one place, right? Like if all that med tech folks like Chris and I, if all we had to deal with was the United States, probably could, you can find your way through that. And of course, I'm fortunate to have the background I have in regulatory and policymaking. So it gives me a little bit of a leg up there and not having to spend quite as much on outside consultants to do that stuff. But the fact that I have to not just do that there, but I have to figure out how then we roll any sort of in progress work with FDA over to CFDA or Chinese FDA. How do I get my Hong Kong clearance underneath and then have to still feed that data into CFDA? So being able to just market and sell your technology or get your technology into the hands of the people who need it in different parts of the world, which is what both Chris and I happen to be working on. We're not focused on a US market entry and a US only ecosystem. So it's very, very hard. And I know you know this from your startup innovators in Scandinavia and Stockholm as well. It's hard for them just to CE mark traditionally was going to be easier for tech companies, tech startups to get. And that sort of is even flipped on its head over the last couple of years.
If I could mention one thing about this, just like was just said about the state level, the states are really where the obstacles are with a lot of this stuff. I was on the founding team at iStat. We sold out to Abbott in '99, but I was on the founding team in '92, and I joined as a sales rep. And within 6 months, I registered as a lobbyist in Louisiana, and eventually wound up registering as a lobbyist in 7 states, and did a lot of work because at the time, medtechs had to do blood testing. Nurses were not allowed to do blood testing in 17 states in the U.S. So I spent from 93 to 96 spending a lot of time going around and getting laws changed or regulations changed to allow nurses to do that testing. And we opened up that market. I did it in telemedicine and a bunch of other areas too. But when you find out in the States is that often it's the state level medical societies. Like with this, you can change it at the FDA level with the hearing aids. And I've done some work about 5 years ago with hearing aids with a few companies. General Hearing Corporation is one of them, was my client. And the FDA is not the problem. The audiologists at the state level mandate that you have to go to an audiologist, you have to go through certain channels, and there are many, many regulatory constraints in that. So the regulatory capture nature of healthcare in the U.S., and I've done MDDR in Europe, I've done COFEPRIS in Mexico, I've done Canada Health in Canada, and I've found by far that U.S. state regulation. In fact, there's many companies that I know of who still don't market in all 50 states. They usually cherry pick the ones that are most economical, and that's the ones they go to in their initial go-to-market plan. So anyway, just want to throw that in. Thanks, I'm David.
Similar policy issues with if you try to establish IRB approval for research, if you're trying to create like a underserved area clinic, the connection with the insurance companies and so on and so forth. So this goes very deep.
Okay, next up, this is where are we at now? We went through there was a ton of Apple headlines, and then it goes into Google Pixel 6, number 2, Facebook post odd thread attacking journalists. Sure they were, from Vice. And then the next one, number 4 or number 5, depending on how you count, CrowdStrike, which is a big American cybersecurity company, one of the biggest, details China-linked Light Basin, which has compromised 13 telecom companies since 2019, gaining access to subscriber info, call metadata, and more. An advanced network of digital spies with a nexus to Chinese interests, has successfully compromised parts of the global telecommunications networks, sweeping up call data dating back years. The hacking group, dubbed Light Basin by the firm and known publicly as UNC 1945, has targeted the telecommunication sector since at least 2016, investigators found. New research has identified 13 telecommunications companies having been compromised by the network dating back to at least 2019. The specific companies are not identified. Here's the quote: "People leverage their cell phones like they're magic," says Adam Mayers, CrowdStrike's Senior Vice President of Intelligence. They don't think about the fact that there's this whole infrastructure that makes it work. And that infrastructure is not something you can take for granted. The report lays out how this group has developed highly customized tools and precise working knowledge of global telecommunication network architecture such that it can emulate network protocols to allow scanning and to, quote unquote, retrieve highly specific information from mobile communication infrastructure. The nature of the data targeted, quote unquote, aligns with information likely to be of significant interest to signals intelligence operations. The researchers stopped short of attributing the activity directly to China, but noted that a hard-coded key within one of the tools identified indicates the developer has some knowledge of the Chinese language. The group employs specialized tools. They are very adept at conducting those operations and have displayed, quote unquote, remarkable operational security. The research emerges amid escalating competition between the Chinese and U.S. governments in all manner of geopolitics, military power, cyberspace, trade, and science. The CIA recently announced that it was reorganizing to focus more on understanding Chinese activities around the world as the country continues to exert itself technologically and the U.S. government grapples with major questions about what it truly knows about Chinese capabilities and whether the U.S. efforts are keeping pace. It would not be unprecedented for Chinese government-adjacent hackers to go after these kinds of targets. In August, CyberReason published research outlining attacks on Southeast Asian telecommunication companies that likely represented espionage. And that was in Indonesia, by the way. We read those headlines in real time about a month ago, you might recall. As the attackers were collecting billing, and by the way, it just happened to happen like 2 days after Indonesia did something that China really didn't like. That was really peculiar. I remember that aspect of that article. The attackers were collecting billing and call detail records, among other material. If this is at larger scale, it would speak to both greater Chinese capabilities and to expanded interest, the desire to track and survey individuals around the world, said Adam Segal, cybersecurity and policy expert at the Council of Foreign Relations. CrowdStrike released the report with information designed to help telecommunication companies look for specific activity in files, both within their corporate networks and within the telecommunications industry itself. Here's the juicy quote at the end, last paragraph. They don't need to deploy malware onto your phone if they're owning the network that your phone is riding on, he said. While some messaging services allow for end-to-end encryption and would therefore prevent content interception, where this is happening and the scale that it's happening, there's still quite a bit of text message traffic that occurs.
Wait, can I just ask a question?
Yep.
So does that mean like WhatsApp, which is end-to-end encrypted, there's like in apps like that, they're still pulling off data from those like quote unquote encrypted apps?
Yep, it's just it needs to be decrypted, and how long does that take?
So like Signal and Proton Mail and all of those are, I mean,
Of
is
course,
this,
if it rides on silicon, it can be it can be cracked.
so what is the value of encrypted end-to-end services that we're all like, well, most of us are going out of our way to
What's the
use?
purpose of having locks on your doors? It makes it harder.
Right.
You're not going to be able to protect yourself from a state actor trying to get into your device, but the average person, I think that's what that security is for.
Okay, so it's some level of protection.
Yes.
I mean, that's good.
Yes. It will stop your college, boyfriend from trying to get into your phone for the most part. So the next one is from CoinDesk. Facebook says it will begin testing its Novi wallet in the US and Guatemala, letting users trade the Paxos dollar. Coinbase will provide custody services. Facebook's Novi wallet is ready to launch, but it won't be launching with the Diem, formerly Libra, stablecoin. aka the Facebook coin. And Coinbase will provide custody services while Paxos is supplying the stablecoin Novi will use. So essentially, it's just it's just a wallet. It's a digital wallet. It's a crypto wallet. Well, they want to have the wallet because that's the data. They just want the data. They're not even really they don't even want to burden themselves with all of the regulatory scrutiny, whatnot. They just want the data.
I think it's a custodial wallet, right? They actually own the wallet. You're basically like Coinbase or any exchange. You're renting the space within it, but they still have access. Paxos operates on that system too. They're custodial, so that means you don't own it. You have the right to access it, but you don't own it.
It says this does not mean our support of Diem has changed. We intend to launch Novi with Diem once it receives regulatory approval and goes live. So this is because they just want to get this thing out the door and they don't want to wait for all the regulatory red tape around their own coin. So let's get this wallet out there with other people's coins so at least we can start getting the users using our wallet before they start jumping into other wallets, because Facebook understands if they don't offer a wallet soon, a lot of Facebook users are going to start signing up for wallets elsewhere. And that's sort of a missed opportunity. So let's rush out the wallet, which doesn't really require a lot of regulatory loopholes or flaming hoops to jump through. So, before people start jumping into other solutions, and then we can add the coin later. It's pretty clever.
Well, the thing is, though, depending on how the wallet is orchestrated, it actually does have some regulatory implications.
I'm not saying it doesn't have none. I'm just saying it's much lighter than trying to get your own coin out there.
No, actually, the stable coin right now, with the current landscape, the stable coin would actually be easier to through than the wallet, because custody is already being looked at and stable coins are not. There's nothing new in stable coins regulation yet. So it'd actually be easier for them to do the stable coin than the wallet if it's custodial, especially.
That might be true all around. I wonder if that's particularly true in Facebook's case, given the amount of scrutiny they're now under. I think them wanting to do a stable coin, they might have to have. I'm no doubt they've had several meetings about that. And let me ask you this: if what you're saying is true, why is the wallet ready and the coin's not?
I honestly think that this is just a very common thing. Most people don't really understand exactly how the regulatory landscape works. Otherwise, most of DeFi wouldn't look like it does, and we wouldn't go through these periods of regulatory scrutiny and stuff. But for Facebook, I honestly think that they aren't considering the fact that custody right now is one of the primary considerations of both the SEC and Treasury. Like, I wouldn't go into a custodial wallet or even a wallet that is connected to a custodial system right now, because that is actually something unless they're saying, what the hell, you guys are already examining us under a microscope, let's go ahead, and just do all of it, I'm going to bend over and cough. Like, maybe that's why. But otherwise, it's probably because they are concerned about, like, a stable coin is harder to develop than a wallet is. That it's not a regulatory issue as much as, like, stable coins right now, every single one of them is poorly designed. Like, they work for DeFi for short-term use, but they will all break because, like, they're based on historical models that have all broken. But for them to design one would take a lot of time and effort, and they're going to have to figure out exactly, if they're going to do a reserve, which I bet they're going to do, where the reserve is going to be from, what is going to be held in the reserve, and then they have to allocate a huge amount of resources for that. So I personally just think they looked at it from a financial matter and said, well, while it looks easier, it's simple, it's much simpler tech. And, I don't see anybody going out making speeches about it. But to know what they're doing, you'd actually have to go back to, like, March or April and look at the list of priorities of what they're actually creating groups around. And custody, wallets, and storage is all a big part of it because of the liability attached. There's a huge amount of liability.
Donna?
Yeah, I understand that they've been at regulators on state regulatory thing for the wallet for quite some time now, for months. And the Paxos arrangement is really interesting because the Paxos in New York, they did the deal with PayPal where they came under Paxos's a bit license, which is specific to New York, in order to be able to have all of the states. And a lot of the big players like a Facebook or a PayPal, they don't want to start without New York. The financial center, and so some of them are coming over under there. At the moment, the DFS, the New York State DFS, in the regulatory approvals is very behind. They're down a lot of people. They're looking for somebody to replace Matt Homer. Other people have left there just because they spend usually 2 years and then they go and get a job that's in the VC
You're gonna say
community.
a real job, weren't you?
No, no, I was
I
going
could
to say
feel it. I could
I
feel
wasn't
it.
going to say a real job. No, I was going to say I was trying to not find something negative to say about the VC community. I was going to say in the VC community, which is kind of where Matt went, and the guy who was also there went to INX as not in the general counsel's office. So I do think that they're a little slow in approvals there. And from what I understand, and I defer to Alexandra on this, that the wallet per se is getting state by state approval. Now they must be doing something with the wallet. They may be getting ready to do money changing between fiat and their coin within the context of the wallet, and then they would need state by state regulatory approval. But with the whole stuff in the White House, where there are specific groups underneath the both the Treasury and the and PAL looking at specifically stable coins is a kind of tough environment to start thinking that Facebook's going to get one out there easily. So a partnership is a good way to get the wallet, which will be, like your bank.
Yeah, because they want to start being a particular. There's a whole. They seem, as Donna, you were the one who said they were testing it out in somewhere in Africa, and it seems like they understand that massive opportunity to use Facebook as the bank for the unbanked, of which there's maybe a billion or so folks who are still unbanked.
Yeah, and last night I was at a talk that former CFTC chair Chris Giancarlo was giving on the occasion of the coming out of his book Crypto Dad, and he said that China with their CBDC, which will be testing next year at the Olympics, Facebook's going to have that wallet that can take that for all the people that go all around the world, and then they're going to use that CBDC until it filters back. We've talked about this many times. But yeah, so the wallet is one of the important things to have in your arsenal with your phone.
Yeah, but I
But
think that the timing is key. They can't wait another year, right? Or even they would prefer to get this thing out now, and so
yeah,
they're willing
yeah.
to do some creative maneuvering to get it out, even if that means we'll bring in our own coin later or whatnot. So the next one says Google says its Play Store labels that detailed user data collection will launch in February of next year, February 2022. Developers can showcase key privacy and security practices at a glance. So apps will now have these like nutritional labels that say this app collects and shares your data, the following data from you, your personal info, your location, and 2 others. Click to see. Also, that's kind of like the fat content or the calories of the app. And then you've got the sugar, which says data is encrypted during transit. So you know if this device encrypts the data, and you can request your data to be deleted or not. This app allows you to delete your data if you ask for it. Okay, that's kind of like the carbohydrates. And then you've got committed to follow the Play family's policies. That's kind of like your vitamin A. And then independent security review. So some other independent security system has reviewed this app and says that it's secure. Okay, great. So now you've got a nutrition label for your apps in the Google Play Store. It's kind of cool, actually. So the Google says its Play Store labels that detail user data collection and more will launch in February. Pretty cool. Next one, Financial Times. Celsius Network CEO says Tether has issued USDT in return for cryptocurrencies, calling into question Tether's claim that it only accepts USD. Well, that's a technical point. Stablecoin operator accepts crypto in return for some loans, big customer says. A major customer of Tether has said the company lends. Here's the article. Stablecoin operator accepts crypto in return for some coins, big customer says. A major customer of Tether has said that Tether lends out new stablecoins in return for cryptocurrencies, a claim that calls further into question Tether's founding promise that it only uses real dollars to issue tokens, which I think everyone knows is bullshit at this point. Alex?
So wait, Celsius actually said Celsius is the one that came out with this information, or a customer of Tether's? I was just a little
Celsius
confused with.
CEO.
Oh my God! See, this is because there's this relationship now. The Tether and Celsius. Tether was loaning money to Celsius. Celsius is under investigation for a lot of stuff based on their design and other things, and their opinion letter is not going to save them. But this is looks like a deal, right? Doesn't this look like a deal? This looks like a deal that the CEO
Yes,
was
it
like,
does.
I give you lots and lots of stuff,
It looks like a
and I want to
classic.
go home.
Yeah. It says Alex Mashinsky, whose crypto lending platform Celsius Network has borrowed from Tether and counts it as an equity investor, told the Financial Times that as part of a lending arrangement, Tether has issued its so-called USDT units in return for well-known cryptocurrencies. If you give them enough collateral, liquid collateral, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and so on, they will mint Tether against it, he says. New USDT is issued for such loans, he says, and later destroyed when the loan is closed, so it does not permanently increase USDT in circulation. The comments contrast Tether's commitments that it issues units of the world's biggest stablecoin only in exchange for hard currencies. And that is probably useful in whatever case, some government agencies building against Tether. And so you're right, this might be kind of a plea deal in a typical kind of drug, pyramid bust. It's going to be what I'm curious, Donna and Alexandra. What is your guess as to where things are going to head for Tether? Where will Tether be 6 months from now?
I think the more interesting question is where is Celsius going to be? I mean, Tether just settled,
Yeah.
something with the CFTC. Again, it was Tether and Bitfinex, which is the exchange for like 42 million, cost of doing business. And I think the issue with Tether is going to be where is the Treasury and the Fed going to come down on these stable coins? Are they going to be forcing them as USDC has kind of complied on its own so that it can move forward in a different direction to be completely backed by treasuries and USD? So I think the Tether is going to have to go in that direction as well. Because it can't have otherwise it's going to get regulated by the SEC if it has this mix of different kinds of security style instruments within it. So I think that's the kind of direction it's going to go. But Mashinsky is going to be, couldn't happen to a nicer guy, in trouble.
Okay.
I mean, oh,
Go
sorry, go
no, go
ahead.
ahead.
I mean, I agree that Tether's got actual problems. It looks like New York actually gave a lot of the evidence that they couldn't actually use, but was supporting their case. They gave it to the feds. I think that there's a lot more that's going to happen with Tether, and the biggest problem with Tether right now is that it doesn't have the place in the universe, the crypto universe, that it held before. Like, it was the only way to get into Bitcoin or other coins for a large part of the world. So it held a place that was really protected. It's not that way anymore. And so now the need and desire to protect it, I think, is much lower. The only thing that's keeping it buoyant now, for the most part, is that Circle, which is the USDC, the next largest stablecoin, is also under investigation. So I think that, people are looking, saying, oh, I put it in a Circle, but wait, I can't do that because now what the hell is going on with that? So I think people are just waiting it out to see what happens. People go in and out of stablecoins really quickly, generally speaking. They don't hold a bunch of them. But the fact that they're the cash equivalents, and then they're using notes up to 9 months and whatever, like, these are all things that are not proper backing for according to their own documents, right? But also not proper backing for something that's supposed to be fully liquid. So I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot that happens with Tether. Celsius Celsius is, I mean, we've known for a while that they've got some problems, and all of DeFi is going to get hit hard. A DeFi winter is coming, but enough will
Yeah,
survive.
there are lots and lots. Just to back up that point and let Alexandra continue, then there are lots of subpoenas outside, whether for specific wrongdoings, investigations. The SEC has done a January 2018 for DeFi now. You know, a lot of lawyers involved.
For sure, for sure. And the other thing is a lot of the base construct of a lot of DeFi literally makes it a security. And I'm not really sure where this is. This is my only thought, and this is the only thing I can say to people, is that there's this misconception that Howie is the sum total of securities law. And it's like the tiniest part of it. So it falls under another section of securities law, but clearly the way most of these are designed, not all of them, but most of them, the way that they're designed, they're clearly securities, and they've been trading, and they don't understand that that is an improper setup, right? So there's two big issues in here. One is the applications that are actually really securities applications that they're treating as if they were not securities, and then the other part are these unregistered exchanges that are trading things that are securities, right? So if you're a swap and you're trading DeFi tools, then, or DeFi instruments, you're literally a swap trading unregistered securities, or an exchange trading unregistered securities. And so that's why you see them they're starting to go after the people who are the devs of these things. Like if you're if you're a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, instead of saying, oh, well, there's no one to go after, which is kind of the thought for a lot of people in these DAOs. That's not really how it works. They start going after the people who started the code. Like you can tell who started it. So, and that's the same basic methodology of what they did to go after the tax evaders in 2017, 2018, was saying, okay, you want to say that you're evading taxes and you don't want us to find you. Well, where do we know you went? You went to these exchanges. So they looked at Coinbase and other exchanges, and they went to the hedge funds, and they just ripped them open and said, all right, we're going to find you this way, and we're going to be harder on you because you didn't actually volunteer to give us information, and you didn't file anything for taxes. So it's the same methodology of they're just going to the beginning, and they're going to rip it all open, and they're going to figure out all the players, and all of this idea that they're somehow protected by this, this magic non entity is not going to last. I don't think so. I hope it won't, but it won't for a long time. I mean, it won't soon, because they're going to rip it apart, and people will be like, oh no, we can't function in this area, which is not true. You just can't do it the way they're doing it.
Okay, next up, Alibaba unveils new 5-nanometer server chip using ARM architecture coming to its data centers in the near future and not to be sold commercially for now. Sundar Pichai, Google CEO, calls for the creation of a new U.S. federal privacy regulations and stresses the importance of staying ahead in AI, quantum computing, and more. In a wide-ranging interview at the Wall Street Journal Tech Live conference that touched on topics like the future of remote work, AI, and tech activism, something the Wall Street Journal knows a thing or two about. Sundar Pichai answered a whole bunch of questions and has a whole bunch of juicy quotes. For example, he says the government has limited resources and needs to focus when it comes to U.S. and China on competing on the likes of AI, quantum computing, and cybersecurity, noting that Google's investments in these areas come at a time when the governments were slightly pulling back on basic R&D funding, and that Google started investing. He says, but all of these are benefiting from foundational investments we made 20 to 30 years ago, which is what a lot of the modern tech innovation is based on, and we take it a bit for granted. So when we look at the semiconductor supply chain and quantum computing, the government can play a key role, both in terms of policies and allowing us to bring in the best talent from anywhere in the world, or participating with universities and creating some of the longer term research areas. These are areas that private companies may not focus on day one, but play out in 10 to 20 years. In the wake of increased cyber attacks across borders, Pichai said the time had come for a sort of Geneva Convention for the cyber world. And the Geneva Convention is what prohibits countries from creating wars with each other. Essentially, that's kind of the rules of engagement around hot combat. And we need that for tech because China and Russia are doing cyber attacks on the US very regularly. We read them almost daily, including today. In fact, today we have both China and Russia separately in separate headlines attacking different parts of the US infrastructure. So that's a brilliant concept, actually. If you want to be part of the developing world, you have to join the Geneva Convention of Behavior and Standards. And if you don't, then you get kicked out of the WTO. That would be amazing. That's a brilliant idea, actually. Adding that governments should put security and regulation higher on their agendas, he more directly argued in favor of a new federal privacy regulations in the US, something Google has pushed for, suggesting something like the GDPR in Europe. So the next one is an in-depth look at Google's quote-unquote moonshot plans to run entirely on clean energy by 2030, going beyond pledges by Apple, Amazon, and others. Sundar Pichai wants to head the first giant company run without emissions around the clock. It will take far more than money to achieve. That's the headline. From Bloomberg, Google Bayview, the company's newest campus, consists of 3 squat buildings nestled near the San Francisco Bay shoreline, a few miles east of its headquarters in Mountain View. The first thing visitors notice are the roofs. They curve down gently from pinched peaks like circus tents, sloping almost to the ground. Each roof is blanketed with overlapping solar panels that glisten with a brushed metal sheen on the edges. Google calls this design dragon scale. And indeed, it looks like as if a mythical beast is curled up by the water in Silicon Valley. I wish we were at this moment a decade earlier, Sundar Pichai admits. I'm worried and very anxious. We're losing time. Yep, that's for real. Okay, and there's a whole bunch of photos of the new Google campus, for lack of a better word, which looks like a huge circus tent, basically. But it's not tent, it's solar panels. And they do look like dragon-like scales, the way that the tent looks. So, annual electricity consumption. Oh, here's a fun one. Of the big tech companies, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, who uses the most million megawatt hours, the most annual energy consumption?
Google.
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 Facebook.
Amazon.
What was the question?
Which one uses the most energy?
From what? Which one?
All energy, annual electricity consumption.
Oh.
You mean
It's
among
got
the
to be
big tech,
Facebook.
right?
Amazon. It's got
Does
to
that
be
include its
Facebook.
users?
I would say manufacturing.
Has to be Facebook.
The choices, Messi,
Oh.
are Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Facebook.
Oh, I think I would say
Amazon.
Amazon.
Shoot,
Amazon.
Amazon.
Now everyone changes their
Amazon.
answer to match Messi. Well done,
Because
everybody.
Messi is
Amazon.
No, you didn't say.
right.
I heard Amazon. I say Amazon because the rest are
Tyler,
just talking about Google
Before
and Facebook.
Messi, only Vinay said Amazon, and then after Messi said Amazon, everyone said Amazon. For the record,
Tyler, we need
it was
I
record
wonder.
We are
I wonder.
well
for
versed,
Messi.
those.
y'all.
I wonder if
We know
Tyler
what's
gave
what.
Amazon
So
Don't
a
mess
just
boost.
from
around
a
with
logistic
Messi.
perspective,
We're
the
Team Messi.
no, the AWS data
Yep,
centers are
yep,
the highest energy consumption, so it has to be Amazon.
yes,
They have more data centers than anybody else.
correct.
How about Google Cloud then?
It's not as big as AWS.
Ah, okay. Okay, Amazon wins.
Yes. So
we need the lottery numbers now too,
By
Messi.
the way, guys, I don't know how many of you know this. Google actually hosts some of their data on AWS data centers.
Oh
Ooh.
wow.
and Apple
Wow.
uses a lot of Google Cloud, actually. And then the state of Maine, one of the 50 American states, it fits in between Microsoft and Google. And then Amazon, being the largest, is still about a third of all household lighting in the US. There you go. Next up, Berlin-based grocery delivery startup Gorillas raises nearly $1 billion. We didn't we read that headline 2 weeks ago? Including $235 million from Delivery Hero at a $3 million valuation. That is precisely the headline we read 2 weeks ago. Why is it back here today? That's weird. The next one, Skyflow, which offers a zero trust repository for customer data, raises $45 million. And the next one, the NSA, National Security Agency, the CISA, the Cyber Security Administration, and the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, say that ransomware group Black Matter, if you're guessing Russia, you're correct, is attacking critical U.S. infrastructure, including the food sector, demanding $15 million in crypto. NSA, DHS, Department of Homeland Security, shine light on Black Matter, ransomware threat to the food industry, demands up to $15 million, where they've now attacked two of America's biggest food supply chain companies. And why are they attacking food? Well, the last thing they attacked was also the food, the JBS Meat Company. So they happen to have an interest in attacking food. And before that, they attacked the Colonial Pipeline, which was energy. And that might make a little sense when you hear me ranting every day, as I'm known to do, about telling everyone to secure their own food and energy and water. Oh, and by the way, last week...
But have you also covered that their next attack, that this is the supposition from the Department of Defense, will be our water lines, and
Right.
they'll be using toxicity to kill people is the next
What a
concern.
surprise. So I've said, take care of your own water,
Did they
food, and
not?
energy. And I understand you think it's secure because it's worked your whole life. And as the little cat who, the parent brings the food right at 5:00, right on time every day, you get your water bowl and your food every time you go at 5 p.m. The food's always there. When you go to the supermarket, the food's always there. And you go to the gas station and the gas is always there. But now that everything's becoming digitized, including our supply chains, including our agricultural and energy sector, and even the water, now that that's all being digitized, it can all be cyber attacked.
There was an attack on Tampa's water lines recently.
We read the headlines about 4 or 5 days ago that it turns out that the water system has been attacked repeatedly lately, and the authorities are not informing people to prevent them from panicking.
Tyler, it's true. And we're basically in cyber warfare, and people don't understand this. This is World War III that we're entering. And these guys are all pushing the boundaries right now of because, it's diplomacy talks about agreeing not to attack infrastructure. And so they're pushing basically, obviously, water is infrastructure, food. So the food ones, they're trying to stay at, like, how big does it have to be considered critical infrastructure? But again, yes, all of these are under attack, and yes, it's daily. So
This is your hourly reminder that I don't even drink water anymore.
Oh my! Do you get like powder now? Are you just like you're concentrated? Did it say what they were? Was it just Bitcoin that they wanted, or was it another
Others,
crypto? As you
Monero was
said.
the other one.
Oh
Yeah,
really? Oh, that's interesting.
yeah. So it's also related, if you can connect the dots for the slow kids in class. Where's Dave? The Biden administration has been working overtime. There was a meeting last week of 30 countries that the White House assembled for no apparent reason. 30 countries to work together to combat cybersecurity threats precisely such as this. And interestingly, Russia was not invited to participate. What a big surprise.
Nor was China.
Nor was China. And this is just such a huge shock and so confusing. If you can figure out why that might be, please DM me and help us figure that one out, because that's a real puzzle we've been trying to figure out. So,
Actually, Tyler, that's because Russia, China, North Korea, Ukraine, they were having a separate conference at the same time.
there you
I
go.
mentioned it weeks ago.
Well, funny you say that, Vinay, actually. Funny you say that. Give me 2 seconds. You'll see why. Give me 2 seconds here. Let me read this headline that somebody just sent in here. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? 2 seconds. Two more seconds. Where is it? Oh, there it is from BB. From Reuters. You've heard of Reuters? You know, one of those places that's still doing journalism and not becoming activists.
Heard about
You've heard
them.
of them. Reuters. Here's the actual headline. China, Russia, Navy ships jointly sail through the Japan Strait.
That's right.
So they were kind of busy.
Remember, I told you they didn't care about the invite. They have their own thing going on. North Korea is already positioning themselves. Their funds, their money is 25% higher than USD.
So this
They are
Oh,
consolidating.
this article
oh yeah, yeah. The Association of Cyber Hackers founding members meeting was going on.
so then this article just came out a few hours ago. China, Russia Navy ships jointly sail through Japan Strait, which is where Taiwan is, by the way, for the Americans in the room, because we don't teach geography in America. So a group of 10 Navy vessels from China and Russia sailed through a strait separating Japan's main island and its northern island of Hokkaido. Holy shit, Batman. That is some serious provocation right there. For those who don't understand, Japan doesn't really think of itself as separated from Hokkaido. Sailing between Hokkaido and Honshu, that's like a BFD. That's a big fucking deal. That's like somebody walking through your living room to get to your backyard.
And saying fuck you in the process.
And
Who said
Tyler, in
that?
addition to not teaching geography, we don't teach cyber, we don't teach any of this stuff. We are, what, a decade behind China, I think is the estimate. So, yeah, this is all pretty
It
serious.
was the first time Japan has confirmed the passage of Chinese and Russian naval vessels sailing together through the Tsugaru Strait, which separates the Sea of Japan from the Pacific. While the strait is regarded as international waters, Japan's ties with China have long been plagued by conflicting claims over a group of tiny East China Sea islets, which is totally to the south of Japan, even below Okinawa, by the way. Those are thousands of kilometers away, by the way. This is a totally separate issue. Tokyo has a territorial dispute with Moscow as well on some of its very northern, kind of west northern islands. The government is closely watching Chinese and Russian naval vessels activities around Japan, like this one, with high interest, says Deputy Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihiko Osuzaki told a regular news conference on Tuesday. We will continue to do our utmost in our surveillance activity in waters and airspace around Japan. A Japan Defense Ministry spokesperson said there had been no violation of Japanese territorial waters and no international rules were broken by the passage of the vessels. Russia and China held joint naval drills in the Sea of Japan as part of a naval cooperation between the two countries from October 14 to 17, involving warships and support vessels from Russia's Pacific Fleet. Moscow and Beijing have cultivated closer military and diplomatic ties in recent years at a time when their relations with the West have soured.
Tyler, I think you're talking about the passage is above Hokkaido, right? To the north of Hokkaido,
Mm,
right? The dispute water between Japan and Russia,
Let me
right?
see. It's called the
I think it's on top.
Tsugaru Strait. Let's
Okay,
Google
I
it.
think it should be on top because it cannot be between Hokkaido and Honshu because that's totally
Off limits, right?
it's totally Japan waters. Yeah,
Right.
I think it's on top.
That's what was spooking me. Was like, holy, there's no way that happened. No, it's
Who
possible.
said somebody?
It's totally possible to do it.
Sorry.
And they did it. It's right between Hokkaido and Honshu.
Woo!
Yes.
Show me. Do you tweet it? Do you tweet it? I take a look.
Did somebody said something about three currencies that are combining? They're consolidating. What was that? I don't know who that was because I was
Oh,
at the
not that
hospital.
they're consolidating
Who
currencies, they're
said that about
consolidating
that it's
forces.
20 higher because they're consolidating? What is that? What was that?
They're not consolidating currencies, they're consolidating forces and resources. Um, that would be Russia, China, and North Korea. We're not talking about North Korea right now, but currently they're 25% up on USD currency, and they've been using a lot of cyber hacking quietly. They've also outsourced a lot of their cyber hackers to different locations. South Korea has asked for assistance to track them, It's really interesting what's going on over there.
Wow, that's news. That's big news.
Next one, Israeli company called Cato Networks or Cato Networks, CATO, which offers cloud-based tools to protect remote workforces, raises $200 million at $2.5 billion. And Global Foundries sets its IPO range at $42 to $47 per share, raising $2.6 billion. Crypto firms and trade groups have filed over a dozen new disclosures to hire lobbyists in D.C. since the tax amendment to the U.S. infrastructure bill this summer. Yep, they definitely want to make sure their voices are heard as they have a seat at that table. And YouTube passes $3 billion in global consumer spending on iOS, ranking third behind Tinder and Netflix. Massachusetts-based Aura, which offers device and identity theft protection, raises $200 million. Brazilian banking and payment startup Pismo, which offers cloud-based tools, raises $108 million from SoftBank. Singapore-based GenieBook, which uses machine learning and human teachers to provide personalized learning. I love those words, personalized learning, by the way. Let people learn at their own pace and
So fantastic.
in their own way. Raises $16 million and says it's used by 150,000 students. UK supermarket Tesco launches its first Get-Go Just Walk Out store using weight sensors and AI to track purchases in partnership with a startup called Trigo. And a consortium of France's largest financial market participants utilized Banque de France's digital currency as part of a 10-month blockchain experiment. TransferWise, now known as Wise, reports Q2 revenue of £132 million, up 25% year over year, as nearly 4 million users transferred the 18 billion, which is up 36% year over year. So I imagine, let's look at the ticker now, shall we? I imagine there might be a nice bump now that they've reported that. And now, no, it's down 6.9%. I guess that didn't meet
So
market
Tyler,
expectations.
TransferWise sent out a notice to all its users about, I don't know, 5 days
Yeah.
ago or so, saying they are not able to do either Chinese-based or Hong Kong-based currency transfers for an undisclosed period of time. Do it as a technology issue that they're working through, but anyway, we use TransferWise to go USD Hong Kong and back and forth.
Kind of humorous, as it's obviously the CCP told them you can't let people get money out of China, and
That's technically an issue.
That's technically an issue. That's a technical issue right there. Technically, we've got an issue with China.
Well, it's very technically
Words
an issue
matter.
for companies that need to, send money back and forth for, critical infrastructure and projects. And, these aren't like large companies probably don't have an issue here, but there are a lot of smaller companies, certainly bigger ones than Bloom Standard, but there are a lot of smaller companies that use TransferWise for this very reason.
So Cheryl and I and Bibi have all confirmed in the DMs that where China and Russian Navy sailed was precisely through Sapporo and Honshu Islands, which that's like walking right through the middle of somebody's fucking living room in the middle of dinner with your dirty feet.
And there's a train track across underground, undersea.
There's an undersea train, that goes between the two islands. That's bullet train, no less. So this is like that is wildly inflammatory. That
says a lot without saying anything.
Yes. Yeah, and they've never done it before. There's no reason to do it other than to send a very huge middle finger. Because it's quite
right in time for October 20th, though.
It's a bit out of their way to go do that one. So, by the way, I mean, for those who weren't with us when we were watching what the rest of the developed world was doing about 6 weeks ago. You had the US, Germany, India, Australia, France, Germany. That's about half of them. All those, and the UK with HMS Queen Elizabeth, all traveling incredibly great distances from the UK and the US and Germany and Japan and Australia and France, all to Taiwan and sailing through the South China Sea, giving a big middle finger to China because China claims that as its territory. So they obviously didn't take that. They didn't want to take that lying down. And now we're starting to see who's actually going to participate in this big brawl after school, behind the gym.
And Russia's conference is tomorrow. We'll see if China shows up, Afghan shows up, and other players, and then we'll understand where the lines are drawn.
Well, we also know who is using Huawei 5G versus, as America said, don't do. That's CCP spyware. You're begging for it. And now that you know why it's so cheap, now you know why they're subsidizing it so they can so they can drink your juicy, juicy data milkshake.
Tyler, check your DM. A few minutes ago, I tweeted an article to you about a new quad that's being formed in the Middle East to counter China there, because China was desperately trying to get Israel, UAE, and a few countries on board.
Oh, that's interesting.
But
That's juicy. Here
U.S.
we go. Hindustan Times from our friend Vinay. Here it is. China ramps up scale and duration of military drills in East after Ladakh Row, meaning China just had a bit of a hot conflict with India up in the Himalayas.
No, that's not the one. It's the article
That
before
was
that.
that article is old.
Okay. Well, this is the most recent one you just sent, the one I just wasn't talking about.
No, the one just before, above that. I sent you another
Oh,
one.
okay. The one before that one. Okay. Then we'll get to that one. Okay.
Why
Here we
U.S.
go.
and India? Why U.S. and
Right.
India?
Why the U.S. and India are taking on China with a Middle Eastern Quad. Well, I can tell you why, but let's see why this journalist thinks why. China has been wooing Israel and the UAE. Now they both seem to have pulled away to be part of a second Quad, or the first murmurings of a new world order. And for those who don't know, who haven't joined us regularly, haven't been following along, in the massive decoupling of China and the US is going to create a new world order without China. And if you have to decide whose side you're going to be on for this big backyard brawl, mud pit, naked oil wrestling match that's going to go on between Uncle Xi and Joe Biden. So
That's such a pleasant image, Tyler.
there may be a few
Oh my
wedgies and
God.
maybe even a swirly at some point during that naked
It's
oil.
dodgeball all
Yes.
over again.
Oh my God, if that actually happened, I think we would find peace somehow because we'd all agree that we need to have our eyeballs removed surgically and the memories pneumatically
Right.
removed.
But it's clear who a lot of the countries are on each side. Russia's obviously with China. A whole lot of America's traditional allies are staying with the U.S. on this one, and because they like doing this stuff called trade, importing and exporting, and they feel like the U.S. is actually a better ally to have than China. But the U.S. is basically forcing everyone to pick sides. So China was trying.
So is China.
Yes, well, China is trying to court lots of people to join their side of the dodgeball match that's about to ensue. And they were trying to court, according to this article, Israel and the UAE, which makes sense because those are not obviously clear which side they will go with. And the article says it's a crowded foreign policy.
Israel, really?
Huh?
I mean, Israel and the U.S. there's no air between those two.
Uh,
Come on, Israel's, and the U.S. are
I would
practically
agree. I
kindred
would agree.
spirits.
as long as we
Yeah,
continue,
but U.S.
yeah, go ahead.
Israel's looking for a new ring. She needs to renew her vows, maybe upgrade the ring,
I
turn
More
in
don't
the
know.
two
money.
I
carat
would
for
I
the
would
five.
definitely say UAE is in that category, but
Yep.
Israel is, come on, let's go. Anyway,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, but you got to remember, Israel is very strained under Obama, and now you got Biden. So, I mean, it was very strong with Trump, and now it's it could be a little bit of a
You might be.
It's going where the
who knows.
kisses are
Yeah.
sweeter.
It says it's a crowded
Yeah, but
foreign policy week with Indian officials participating in the Moscow led round of talks with the Taliban on October 20th. That's tomorrow, where the Taliban's going to meet with Moscow and India's participating tomorrow. And the external affairs minister is meeting with Israel to update the relationship with the new Bennett government in Israel. And then there was Monday late evening, the part virtual, part in person summit between the foreign ministers of India, Israel, UAE, and the US. A startling idea of an informal quad on this side of the globe. So, who was the elephant in the room this time? No prizes for guessing again. China. As China reorganizes the world in her own image, from South Asia to Canada and Europe, via Israel and Gulf kingdoms like the UAE, it seems as if the US is gaining fuller clarity about its role as a big power after having divested itself from its millstone called Afghanistan to protect its own position from China snapping at its heels, seeking to become world number one. The U.S. is clearly exploring new arrangements, alliances, and coalitions. At the end of the day, give or take a military nuance or two, it all amounts to the same principle: who is your enemy number one? That's the principle on which the Quad, which members are the US, Australia, Japan, and India, is built. That's the traditional Quad, by the way. When you hear the Quad mentioned in political news, that's the OG Quad, which, by the way, they just had a meeting 3 weeks ago, which is US, India, Japan, and UK. Yeah, Australia, US, Australia, Japan, India. That is also the principle on which Quad 2, Middle Eastern Quad, is being natured. And in this Middle Eastern Quad, it's Israel, UAE, India, US. What is truly surprising is the supersonic speed with which the U.S. is moving. Less than a week ago, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken met his counterparts in the UAE and from Israel in Washington, D.C. They agreed to set up 2 working groups on religious coexistence, said to be the UAE's idea, and on water management and energy issues, said to be Israel's idea. The meeting in D.C. was to celebrate the first anniversary of the Abraham Accords signed a year ago between the Israel and the UAE and Bahrain, which opened up parts of the Gulf to Israel and vice versa, ending decades of mistrust between the two. In the year since, Israel has opened embassies in the UAE and Bahrain, and an unprecedented 130,000 Israelis arrived in the UAE as tourists, and the UAE Israel Business Council was set up on Monday as India was added to the 4th leg to stabilize the table. The message was clear: UAE capital plus Israeli technology plus inexpensive Indian labor is being stirred in a potpourri by the U.S. while offering each country the flexibility to move as fast, slow as its domestic policies allows it to go. That's the beauty of the first Quad anyway. When it was the first thought up, the Japanese believed it should have a security dimension, but India has shied away from that idea and believes non-military determinants are the way forward: vaccine development and delivery, for example, and climate change. A determined U.S. decided to act. How does India benefit? Okay. So this will be very interesting because the UAE was really in the middle because they did go with Huawei 5G, even though a US said don't do that. And if you do that, we won't sell you our F-35s, which is the kind of top of the line, fighter aircraft. And the UAE says, but we really need this 5G, the real cheap 5G, and they bought it anyways. They went with Huawei anyways, even though we told them we won't sell you the F-35s, and then it turns out we're selling them the F-35s anyways.
So Tyler, that section that's titled "A determined U.S. determined to act"? Read that, because Evan's point about Israel and U.S. being joined at the hip and why that may be changing is right in that section. So you might want to just read that out loud.
Which a determined U.S. decided to act. But the U.S. was not content to watch when it believed its interests were threatened by its close ally Israel and its close competitor China. So 3 years after Netanyahu sold a section of the very busy commercial Haifa port to Shanghai International Port Group in 2015, the U.S. Navy objected to the sale because its Sixth Fleet uses an adjacent Israeli naval base where nuclear weapons-capable submarines are housed. In 2020, Netanyahu further refused the U.S. Coast Guard permission to inspect the port for Chinese surveillance capabilities. Yep, that'll fuck shit up real quick.
Yeah, so after what they did in Sri Lanka with the port, I mean, I'm surprised Israel even gave them 1% of the Haifa port.
The Joe Biden administration, concerned that Iran had become China's go-to nation to buy oil, quickly got into the act. Only a few months ago, Dubai's DP World and Israel Shipyards Industries, part of Israel's military complex, won the project to develop a section of the Haifa port that lies directly opposite the Chinese-owned section to create a U.S.-friendly harbor at this crucial future transportation hub. So I think Israel's intentionally trying to sit right in the middle between China and the U.S., similar to the way that the UAE has done, and Thailand as well. And there's these really interesting key countries who think that it's in their best interest to play both sides, namely Thailand and
For the
UAE.
upgrades.
By the way, the UAE and Thailand are both saying they're going to participate in the China's central bank digital currency. So yeah, we'll see. But this is the whole big brouhaha. But you're right. It would be a little. I agree with you, Evan, that it would be quite surprising if Israel didn't side. But I think strategically, I think they have a well-deserved reputation as master negotiators, and the best negotiation move is to at least pretend like you might go to the dance with Uncle G, because that's leverage. So anyway, next up.
Doesn't the whole thing sound like, the old East versus West kind of scrambled things, everybody taking sides? It just is not a nice time to see this.
Mm-hmm.
It just, I thought we were way beyond this, especially for Africa. You can see really the aftermath of all that type of campaign. Look at Somalia after 1991, the socialism and the West and stuff. And then when the wall starts crumbling and socialism falling apart, and nobody had any interest. And, all of a sudden the fighting comes and just, it became stateless. It still is stateless. The whole country divided into three origins, three regions. I'm just worried that we're gonna have another scramble for Africa if these things continue. Ugh.
Oh yeah, China's already dumped $1 billion into Africa, and they're going to use the resources there to leverage this so-called war. And honestly, Messi, this was going to happen with IoT making us closer neighbors and creating less resources for everyone. We're scrambling for number one, we're scrambling for profit. This was going to happen.
Okay.
It just is sad.
So next up is, did we go through? We pretty much have gone through the big stories. TransferWise did its Q2. A Finnish startup called Avon, which helps companies build open source projects, raises $60 million. India's Cred, which rewards customers for paying their credit card bills on time, raises $251 million. A hacker breached the Argentinian government's IT network last month, stealing citizens' personal details and leaking some, including Lionel Messi's details, which is the biggest personality in all of South America, let alone Argentina, where he's practically a living god. Invesco drops its pursuit of a Bitcoin futures ETF hours before the first such product begins trading on the U.S. stock market. And there's sources claiming that Beats Fit Pro earbuds with active noise cancellation and Apple's H1 chip will launch November 1st. New York Attorney General's cease and desist letters to two cryptocurrency lending firms, Nexo and Celsius. And the Wall Street Journal reports that according to internal documents, Facebook's AI has minimal success enforcing its rules against problematic content, including removing an estimated 3 to 5% of hate speech. Right. And then Facebook responds an hour later saying, you dipshits, we don't use AI to remove hate speech. We have dozens of ways that we do that. We're not at all dependent on our AI to remove the hate speech. That's not how we remove the hate speech. In fact, we remove 99.999995% of hate speech, but not by AIs. So the fact that our AIs remove 3 to 5%, the fact that you're trying to scare everybody into thinking that we only remove 3 to 5%, that's what your journalistic jihad that you're on, the Wall Street Journal Jihad organization, is trying to do corporate terrorism against Facebook. They're trying to confuse and stir misinformation and fake news that Facebook only removes 3 to 5% of hate speech because they intentionally write a headline that's intentionally misleading by saying Facebook's AI has minimal success in enforcing its rules against problematic content, including removing an estimated only 3 to 5% of hate speech. And you reading that assume, oh, wow, if somebody writes hate speech, there's only a 3 to 5% chance that it'll be removed. No, not at all. They don't really use AIs to remove hate speech. They use humans to do that. And you'd be wrong. And they got that data point precisely from a document out of thousands from somebody in the organization whose views, that's their own personal view. This is not a Facebook recognized fact or anything like that. This is just somebody who wrote some slide in some deck that they whipped up at El Pollo Loco before they went into the meeting. And now it's in the hands of the Wall Street Journal. And then rather than contact Facebook and say, hey, Facebook, we found this slide that somebody wrote at El Pollo Loco before their meeting one day 5 years ago. Can you shed some light on this? Because we'd love to know what this is really about. They didn't do that. Why didn't they do that? Because they don't want to know the context of what it's about, because they're not interested in context. They're interested in jihad. They're doing the jihad. They're trying to take them out. They got the guns, they got the Kalashnikovs ready. And they don't care what Facebook's explanation is. They're not interested in rational, reasonable explanations.
What is Tyler? What is that? Like, do you guys hear something?
Yes, I did. Some da 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 da
That's the
sound.
That's
Did
the
you?
jihad
jihad.
sound.
That's the Wall Street Journal
That's
jihad
the
that
jihad.
they're on.
Okay. I thought that was
No,
real.
I mean I've heard that sound, but like at weddings and
Should have made that a trivia.
celebrations.
I would have won.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean
I,
I think we're confounding sounds with like extremists, but yeah, usually that thing that I can't do,
No,
it's when people have
Lakeisha.
been celebrating.
I have my
That's
own leak. I have my own sources. I have my own leaked files. So we have our own whistleblower who sent me leaked files from inside the Wall Street Journal. We've got actual files that we're now sharing from our own sources from the Wall Street Journal. This is reportedly a sound file from the Wall Street Journal's editor's office right there.
Stop it, Tyler.
That's
No.
they've
Tyler, I
internally
gotta tell
a
you.
No.
I'm being
I know
told
I love you, but
that
no.
they're calling it
No, no,
the Wall
no.
Street Journal
You know,
jihad on
No.
Facebook.
But you
No.
Oh
press
my
a
oh
button,
God.
right?
Lord.
It is
You
not
know that,
automatic, right?
Can I ask a
yeah,
question about the headphone or the earphone thing really quickly? Uh, just a quick question. I read, and this is not useful because I don't have it in front of me, but I read that that noise canceling headphones or noise canceling ear things that go in your ear can actually do long term
Yeah, we
damage
read
to the
that
nerves.
48
oh
hours
my,
ago.
Okay.
Yeah, it does.
don't say that.
It does.
My husband and I use them regularly.
It
Ah,
was that Alexandra who was saying that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
yes.
that
Alexandra
was.
loves
We
it.
read that
Yeah.
headline 48 hours ago. The claim by the doctors is that it causes wax buildup, and the wax buildup will lead to other problems. So if you leave the sealed ones, the AirPod Pros, for too long, you'll get that wax buildup, and that wax buildup can lead to other difficulties.
Clean your ears
Yes.
regularly.
Yeah. So take, what, they could fix that very easily. They know when it's in your ears, and then after 3 hours in your ears, they can say, hey, clean the wax out, bozo.
Yeah, use a candle, the wax candle.
No, they don't.
Oh my God. That's
Hydrogen
that's
peroxide.
have you I don't know if in that article it actually talked about the developers that are actually having a problem because they have them in like 8 or 12 hours a
Yeah.
day while they're working, and they're actually seeing like the cilia is damaged and it can't be repaired. Like they're missing now like particular high tones or whatever. I don't know if that was probably in that article that you read.
So check this out. So a couple other new headlines have just popped in since we went through the big ones previously. Facebook Portal Go review, which they launched a week or so ago. Now the tech journalists got their hands on the preview unit and they're reviewing it. And they say that the portable with decent 6-hour battery life and good camera and tracking, but too few apps and requires Facebook or WhatsApp account. And another one just came in that Roblox, this from New York Times. It says Roblox's effort to engage an older audience, because it's mainly used by kids, while maintaining a safe environment for its youngest users, offer a roadmap for other internet platforms. And that indeed is an interesting challenge. How do you, they're predominantly a kids platform. How do you let the adults in and keep the bad actors out? Well, you got to have identity verification would be a starting point, perhaps. Okay, so now we went through the big boring headlines that your cousins and coworkers will be harassing you about at the next family barbecue in a month from now. And now we get into the really juicy, fun tweets that everyone's twatting on Twitter since we last met 9 hours ago, like the one I was reading before that the NSA, the DHS, say that Black Matter, a ransomware threat to the food industry, demands $15 million in a mix of Bitcoin and Monero. And this is another example of Russian-backed cyber attackers who previously used to work inside of Russian soil, who Joe Biden met, which is why Joe Biden had an emergency meeting with Vladimir Putin in Geneva about 2 months ago and told him, you better knock that shit off. Here are 16 things you cannot touch. If you do, we will retaliate and specifically target your Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline that is the bulk of your revenue that you sell to Europe. And you wouldn't like us to kill that pipeline, would you? Big Daddy Vladdy, you wouldn't like that, would you? No, you wouldn't. And Vladdy said, no, that would be terrible. His exact words. Right. So don't fuck with our stuff. Right? And if it's happening from inside Russia, knock that nonsense off. Got it? Are we clear? Yeah, we're clear. Okay, great. So a week later, the Russian hacking outfit, REvil, mysteriously shuts down. Disappears from the internet. Gee, I wonder what happens next. As I said, the day that we read that headline that REvil disappeared from the internet, I said, watch, 2 weeks from now, they're going to reappear in Ukraine. 2 weeks later, we read a headline, oh, there's a new ransomware gang based out of Ukraine called DarkSide. Gee, I wonder who that could be. And now DarkSide is now attacking our food infrastructure, just like they used to attack the JT food, the big meat producer, the one of the world's biggest meat producers and the U.S.'s biggest meat producer that they attacked when they were previously known as, a different ransomware gang when they were on Russian soil. But Big Daddy Vladdy told them, hey guys, you got to move this shit out of our soil so that we can have plausible deniability and yet still meddle in, cyber terrorism. Because they're trying to attack our key infrastructure, food, energy, and water. And that's what we've been reading, those headlines the past multiple times over the past week. Specifically those things. Specifically the same things I keep telling everybody to make sure they have under their own control. Because now that they are controlled by technical means, right? There's technical systems that control the food systems and energy systems and water systems. They can be hacked. And that's what they're aiming for. And we even know they're aiming for them. And we're even proactively trying to take steps against it. But winter's coming, and oh boy, is that going to, you think it's bad? When they did shut down the Colonial Pipeline on the whole West Coast, and all the cars had to line up, and it was all tragic. Imagine if that had happened during February. And when, imagine an energy shortage turns off in Chicago in January. Good times. So it's going to get really interesting. And as somebody said, it is the beginnings of cyber warfare, and that's why Joe Biden brought together 30 countries on Wednesday last week for an unprecedented move by any president ever, specifically to address this, because we know it's coming this winter. And oh, by the way, of those 30 countries, Russia and China wasn't invited. Gee, I wonder why. So start taking care of your water, food, and energy. Real quick, because when it's working, when the water's working, when the food's working, your entire life, your parents' life, your grandparents' life, and their parents' life, for your full known history, the water's always worked, the food's always worked, the energy's always worked. In some countries, it's no longer working. China itself doesn't have energy in about half of China at the moment. The lights are off. They're using fucking candles.
Tyler, I think this is the time where people need to start getting creative and get more innovative. Like even start digging wells and start using solar energy.
Well, to finish this point, Russia and China both know what happens when a population no longer has food at the supermarkets. They've gone through that.
That's right. They become savages.
They become very distrusting of the government they used to trust in. They get very anxious. They start hoarding. And things go from ubiquitous and on demand to non-existent and hoarding. And you saw a glimpse of this with toilet paper during COVID. People, as soon as it becomes unavailable, it becomes incredibly valuable. And everyone starts hoarding. And that's bad when it's toilet paper, but it's even worse when it's water, food, or energy. So, get ready.
The North remembers.
And so does China and Russia. They know how America's never had to face that before. Americans and the American government's never had to deal with a population who has lost fundamental trust in the ability. When the government can't provide efficient, affordable health care, that's a problem. It's not fucking the most urgent, critical thing in the world. And maybe they're not the best at providing free education, but that ain't what you can go a lifetime without education and essentially a lifetime without healthcare. You can go several days without food. You can go very few days without water.
We're going to test that theory, Tyler. I no longer drink water.
I definitely want to test your genes after this.
So get ready. Here comes cyber warfare. Perhaps as soon as this winter. I mean, they're already dabbling in it. That we just read headlines last week that they've been attacking our water supply, and the agencies have not been alerting the public for fear of alarming them. And they named the plants and the dates when it happened, and they're escalating. And now today, the headline today is they just attacked two of America's biggest critical food suppliers. So, next up from Shirok, The Guardian, Facebook must prioritize children's well-being.
Tyler.
Yes.
Sorry, do you plan to stream the Google event? If not,
Yes.
Cami will open the AI room in 5 minutes.
Yeah. We can do both simultaneously, yeah.
Yeah, Cami, up to you.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I think I'll continue with the AI room. I have a number of great headlines ready.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, the Google live stream event starts in 30 minutes for the Google Pixel 6. So The Guardian just wrote a headline which says, a couple newbies with their hands up. Welcome, Peggy Sue and Ty Bowie. I hope I pronounced that right. The Guardian headline reads, Facebook must prioritize children's well-being, Zuckerberg is told. UK campaigners write to Chief Executive Mark Zuckerberg with list of demands to ensure online safety for young people. Now, that implies that they think Facebook is unsafe for kids. Now, what facts, what data do they have to base that assumption on? I would argue they're likely responding to the Wall Street Journal's headlines from a week and a half ago from Frances Haugen, the whistleblower, where she shared the document of the chart that we were debating hotly in this room when we opened the room 2 hours ago, where although the Wall Street Journal wrote the headline that Facebook is toxic for young women. That was the headline they wrote. Facebook is toxic knows that it is knowingly toxic to young women. That's the narrative. That's the framing that they posited. And now people are absorbed that, didn't read Facebook's rebuttal saying that's hogwash. Here's the slide where they stole that data point from. And because not only did the Wall Street Journal run with that headline that Facebook is knowingly toxic for its young users, so did their friends over at the New York Times and the Washington Post and Vice, all jumped on that gravy train and that dog pile, and the hyenas all got together as a whole bunch of journalistic jackals and on their journalistic jihad, and they took down the infidels and they're attacking Facebook. And now you've got misinformed people, intentionally misinformed by the Wall Street Journal, now writing letters to Mark Zuckerberg with a list of demands. UK campaigners write to Mark Zuckerberg with a list of demands to ensure online safety for young people. Okay, are you researchers? Did you do research? Did you have some evidence that Facebook is not safe for young users? Where are you getting your information from, son? And this is precisely what the Wall Street Journal intended to enable. It's a jihad. Watch how this article plays out. Facebook has lost the trust of parents. And this is The Guardian, again, playing along with their journalistic friends at the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, jumping on the dog, adding more gas to the dumpster fire of misinformation. So watch what The Guardian does here. Facebook has lost the trust of parents. That The Guardian says. Okay, according to what statistic? No, there is no data. There is no link to some chart. It just says it as it's a matter of fact with no link to any source. So how do you do that? You're a publication. You're not a research institution. You're not a think tank. What is that based on? Because you're a journalist and you don't like Facebook? You can write that as the opening line of your story. Facebook has lost the trust of parents, is prioritizing commercial gain over children's needs, and must take steps to restore faith in its platforms. A global alliance of children protection campaigners has warned Mark Zuckerberg. Huh? A global alliance of child protection campaigners based on what? Based on what data? Based on what research? Based on what information? The Facebook founder and chief executive is urged to publish its internal assessments, its own research of the risks young people face on its services in a letter with 59 signatories. So there's 59 signatures telling Facebook to release its own research and data, which the people signing this assume will support their claims, assertions that Facebook's harming children. Hey, we think you're harming children. Release the data that shows that we think what we think we know. Huh? What are you talking about? So Facebook has, and then here's the quote from them. The company must do significantly better to regain the trust of parents and child protection professionals, and most importantly, to ensure its product decisions contribute to rather than compromise children's safety and well-being. Says the letter. Zuckerberg is urged to take the following 5 steps to address concerns over its approach to protecting. It must share all its internal research on the impact its platforms have on children's well-being. It must set out what research has been conducted on how the company's services contribute to child sex abuse. It must publish risk assessments of how its platforms affect children, and it must provide details of an internal reputation review of its product, and it must review the child protection implications of encrypted messaging. The letter has been sent to Zuckerberg in the wake of revelations from Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen, who has accused the company of lax approach to safety in testimony to U.S. senators and a number of document leaks that formed the backbone of a series of articles in the Wall Street Journal. One of the most damaging leaks was internal research at Instagram showing the app's impact on teen well-being, including one slide showing 30% of teen girls felt Instagram made dissatisfaction with their body worse. Kudos to the Guardian for actually kind of well articulating the nuance of that. Shame on them for not mentioning the other 24 data points in that same graph that counter that exact narrative. Echoing Hagen's claims that the company puts profit before people, the group again, so they're echoing the whistleblower, the misinformed whistleblower, essentially. Or I should say the whistleblower who's not being very careful with the sort of misinformation that's, well, it's not even her. It's the Wall Street Journal's letters based on her whistleblowing that is then intentionally misinforming people, which is now forcing them to write crazy crackpot letters to Mark Zuckerberg, demanding that he do these ridiculous actions based on information they have none of, based on pure wild cockamamie assumptions because they read a journalistic jihad piece by the Wall Street Journal. A spokesperson for Facebook has responded. We're committed to keeping young people who use our platform safe. We've spent $13 billion on safety in recent years, including developing tools to enhance safety and well-being of young people across Facebook and Instagram. We've shared more information with researchers and academics than any other platform, and we will find ways to allow external researchers more access to our data in a way that respects people's privacy. So we're going to do what we've been doing for many years, spending billions of dollars making sure users are safe, because God knows you're not going to stop your kid from sitting on their phone at the restaurant. We know you aren't actually going to be a good parent and start, telling them to put their phone down during dinner. We know you're going to let them consume whatever it is they're consuming endlessly, all night and day, all hours of the night, even when friends are visiting, even when they should be outside playing. We know you're a derelict parent. So we're actually going to do a lot of research with reputable folks internally. We're not going to share that shit with you. It ain't got nothing to do. We don't need to do that. That's not going to help the scenario. It's our company. It's our money. Thank you. You're a derelict parent. Your kid's clicking on ads. We get that money. We do the research so that your kid keeps clicking on ads. You never mind it. You just keep, go have your Chardonnay and chat with your friends over in the park and let your kid, by the way, your kid's on TikTok. By the way, your kid isn't even on Facebook.
Exactly.
A spokesperson, so it says the letter was sent as hearings resumed into the UK's draft online safety bill. Here's a quote. Attention is what these platforms sell. They sell advertising. So this is their business model, to engage users, and they have to build algorithms to do that. And certain types of harmful content are just more engaging. Yeah, if you don't like it, don't let your kid watch fucking Facebook all day. But let me tell you, they're not. Kids are not on Facebook. They're on TikTok. But you're so bad of
Tyler.
a parent, you don't even know that.
Tyler, one of my neighborhood friends posted on Facebook, and this is why I feel like I can, and it wasn't in like a private group or anything, it was just out there on Facebook, that her 13-year-old daughter negotiated a $1,200 deal with her dad to delete and stop all use of TikTok. And there was like a whole terms and conditions thing that she posted there. And well, I think, there's a certain level of absurdity there. Like I don't think we would ever do that as parents, but the string ended up being this entire back and forth of like the reasons why they as parents thought that this was an equitable and amicable way to partner with their kid who on her own was identifying harms associated with social media, but particularly TikTok. And they had asked a question about Facebook, and she was like, nobody uses Facebook anymore. We're all on TikTok, but I'm done.
If you ask your kid what app they're using, they're on TikTok all day. They don't want to be on Facebook. They're not using Facebook. They think Facebook is for grandma and grandpa.
What about Snapchat?
I think it's awesome they had that equitable negotiation that shows that they can talk and work on it together and come to a solution that they'll both enforce. I think
But
that's
but
awesome.
here's the crazy irony. The biggest meme in all of TikTok in recent days is destroy your fucking school. It's literally a challenge. Every school in the US, the principals are Google school destruction challenge, Google slap a teacher challenge, and you will see cities across America, the principals pleading, please stop this insanity. You're destroying our schools.
This is
You're
true.
assaulting the teachers. TikTok is owned by the CCP. There's 3 board seats. They have one of them. They are actually a financial investor. That was announced 2 months ago publicly. South China Morning Post. China's an
TikTok is a nightmare. TikTok's going to be the biggest company in a
Tick.
few
Hold
years. I
on.
mean,
Hold
because
hold
it's
hold
huge.
hold the
Yeah.
phone. TikTok's challenge several months ago was the Benadryl challenge. People died overdosing on Benadryl during the Benadryl challenge. How many kids are dying on Instagram? Wall Street Journal, where is your jihad against TikTok? Where kids are actually, fucking dying
A disabled teacher was attacked by a student because of that challenge.
on TikTok.
TikTok.
Where's your jihad against TikTok for slapping teachers?
Oh, Tyler,
Yes,
the sound, I DM you. Apparently, that sound is a bit offensive for Arabians.
it's not.
It's quite offensive,
It's not.
Tyler.
I don't know. There's a DM that
It,
that I forwarded to
yeah,
you.
some people can. If you're welcome to feel offended by that sound. That sound can mean the same as a laugh could be offensive to somebody. So the point
But
is,
Tyler, look at the dry powder thing on TikTok. Have you been looking at this, where kids are taking a spoonful of dry powder and convulsing? It's a real a wonderful trend on TikTok.
It's digital opium,
oh,
guys. Like
oh,
when you
I see.
realize
But
this is digital
it's
opium.
Facebook that's the problem. Even though the kids are all on TikTok doing the Benadryl challenge, the Tide Pod challenge, the you know eating laundry detergent challenge, the milk crate challenge, where people are ending up in emergency rooms for breaking their fucking necks. Right.
Punch your teacher
Slap
challenge.
your teacher challenge, where
Bathroom
people are
challenge.
permanently being banned from schools, so they ruin their lives prematurely and causing havoc at schools. Right. Right. Instagram's the problem. Exactly. Where's the jihad against TikTok? Silence. Nothing. Zero. Bubkiss.
Does TikTok share news stories? Do they monetize
Oh,
content and
Chris. Oh,
stuff?
shit. Oh, we got.
Yeah.
Oh. You mean Facebook is competing directly with the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and Vice, and all of the whole gang, and the Guardian for advertising dollars, and winning and kicking their ass and taking away their traditional revenue stream of advertising is now going over to Facebook, and it's not going over to TikTok. And that's why
It's
they're
bigger than that,
now
Tyler.
you know why the Wall Street Journal is on a jihad against Facebook and not TikTok. And that's why they're silent about TikTok, because they're doing commercial terrorism against their main competitor. And they've misinformed these sad individuals who are now writing pointless letters to Zuckerberg with faulty notions of demanding that he release all of these information and studies that they have inside of Facebook, because we think you've got really bad shit going on inside of Facebook. You got to open your doors. You got to let us see all the bad shit you're doing. We think you've got Uyghurs in there inside of Facebook. Let them out. What? What are you talking about? Based on what were you reading that is leading you to write cockamamie shit-brained letters to Mark Zuckerberg? You read the Wall Street Journal, the Wall Street Jihad Journal.
But Tyler, here is my question. Even yourself, when the Wall Street Journal was coming like in a week, one after the other, you were saying yourself that Facebook was having a problem because there was no, like, they had a trust issue. We all had
Yes.
the trust issue. So you yourself
Sure.
were saying that
Yes.
this was the accumulation of the
Yes.
trust issue.
I agree.
So a lot of people have taken that in face value
Right.
because of the Facebook trust issue and the repeated lies they have done so many times in years. So I think even yourself did it for a week until even they came back, maybe after 2 weeks, after even those things happen. So they did have a starting point, right? I mean, that's why it took hold and it did have some kind of credence because of what they have been doing before.
Yeah, Facebook.
I think the point though is I think what Tyler's going to drive at Messi, and I agree. Like, right, Facebook did some nasty stuff with the
Right.
researchers, banning them, giving them
Yes.
limited data
Holy
sets,
shit! Is
etc.
that bad
But
shit? Yes.
when you look at the slides, right, 24 pieces of data, they highlighted the single negative part and took that and ran with it as far as they could go. And when you zoomed out at the data, when you looked at it objectively, you actually realized that had they framed it that 2/3 of the users do not feel negative imaging from Instagram, there would be no story. But because whoever put together the slide said 1/3 do, which is 1/3 is less than 2/3, correct?
Yep.
So that would mean a majority do not feel body image issues when they use
That's
Instagram.
true.
But because somebody framed the slide incorrectly, maybe thinking 1/3 is less than 2/3, let's highlight 1/3. They don't realize 1/3 of something bad is bad, right? And so that's, I think, what you're getting at, Tyler, is if they had journalistic integrity,
Correct.
they would say, like, look, this is the data we have.
Right.
Overall, it looks like Instagram's positive. However, we must address the negative body issues that arise because these are large problems. But they didn't get that way. They just took this story and it was salacious and run with it. Oh my God, Instagram and Facebook are killing girls. And that's what Tyler's getting at.
Right.
And I don't think
I
I don't like
understand
the
that.
Yeah.
entity. I don't like what's going
But
on.
then.
I don't like what it's revealing about human beings.
Yeah.
But journalistic integrity
Yeah,
needs to
yeah.
come back
But
on track.
Messi has a great point. I have pointed out Facebook has huge trust issues, but not for the reasons that the Wall Street Journal is reporting. The trust issues with Facebook is when researchers are trying to do research on Facebook, namely the NYU Observatory team, they intentionally booted them out and restricted them from getting any data at all, and then lied about why they booted them out. They said, oh, we have to boot you out because the government agencies, the FTC, says we can't sacrifice user data. And then 24 hours later, the FTC writes a public post saying, hey, Mark, that's bullshit. What this researcher is doing is totally illegal because the users themselves are sharing their personal Facebook data, the data that they generate on Facebook, to those researchers knowingly. They knowingly are sharing that data with that researcher. We've got no problem with that. Leave our name out of your mouth. Don't use us as an excuse for not letting that researcher collect that data from those users who are knowingly sharing it with that researcher. And Facebook had no response to that. That's shady shit, y'all. That's really shady shit. Because then that researcher also found that Facebook was hiding, because that researcher was specifically searching about political data, about the political advertising that was going on during the elections. And that's what got Facebook very nervous, because she found out that Facebook intentionally removed a lot of the Facebook content that the January 6th Capitol stormers put on Facebook. And they hid all of that data. And she found that out, that they were intentionally hiding that data. And so she reached out to my buddy, Mark Scott at Politico, who's the tech journalist for Politico in Europe. And she said, hey, Mark, I'm the researcher for NYU Observatory. Remember that I just got kicked out of Facebook? That was huge news 24 hours ago, right? Well, guess why they kicked me out? And I'm going to share whistleblow to you and let you know why they really kicked me out. Because I had just stumbled upon something incredibly embarrassing, which is Facebook was an accessory to the January 6th Capitol storming. And that's why they really didn't want me getting into the data, and they kicked me out right as I found that data. I've got the receipts, Mark. Why don't you go ahead and share it on Politico? So he did. And that's some double extra crazy shady shit.
Hey, Tyler, could I just make a quick
Go
point
ahead.
on statistics? I think some people are looking at some things the wrong way. Just because 30% is a minority, this is not an election. 30%, depending on what you're looking at, could be very statistically significant. I guarantee you, if it was a drug trial and 30% of the people died, they pulled the drug. So just because it's the minority, that doesn't mean that it's inconsequential. So I mean, I
Except
just wanted to make
it
that
is
point really
totally
quickly.
it's utterly unconsequential because God bless NPR who came out with the piece about that saying, "Hey, headline that Facebook survey that the Wall Street Journal is reporting about is utterly meaningless. We interviewed a professional psychologist researcher about how psychology research is done, and here's her quote: that Facebook survey, that ain't scientific. That ain't data. That's dog shit in terms of research."
That's a different
No,
issue.
not
That's
at
a different
all.
issue. I'm
Because
just
as a journalist, you're saying, Facebook's hurting girls. No, Facebook had a data slide of unscientific survey that showed that 30% of the young girls said that they think Instagram's having a negative cause on their body self-image, which that data is dog shit. So it doesn't matter what they think, what they said in response to that survey, because it's not scientific. So
I agree, but I'm trying to
but
get away from the
okay.
Facebook issue. I'm
So
just
did
talking
Wall
about
Street Journal
30%.
say, "Oh, Facebook did an unscientific survey that means nothing, and the result was this"? No, they didn't do that. They said, Facebook is toxic to young girls, implying that the research is valid."
Oh, I'm not disagreeing with you on the Facebook issue at all. Somebody earlier just made a point about 30% as being less than the
Right, but it
remainder,
makes
which
no
is
difference
70. So
because the data is
I'm
dog
just
shit.
I'm just saying if you separate out the Facebook issue, we're not talking about Facebook. Just a way to look at statistics. Don't always assume because something
Fine.
shows up as 30% that it's not significant
Okay,
or not
but
important
in this case,
as
it's
a
not really
generalization.
relevant
That's
because
all.
it could be 100%. It wouldn't make any difference because it's not scientific.
Right. Exactly. Okay.
Right. But the point is, Wall Street Journal found a narrative totally unbased in any reality and ran with it without checking with Facebook about the context of what it means. It was provided by a whistleblower who doesn't even work at Instagram, who had no connection to that document that was made at Chipotle 10 minutes before it was delivered by somebody in Facebook who just had an idea. They just did a quick little survey on their own. They don't know. They didn't go to school for research. They're not a scientist. They're working in the marketing department at Facebook, and they thought it'd be fun to do a quick little survey of 1,000 users. And here's what we found. So this might be worth looking at. Well, you as a journalist aren't a researcher either. You can't interpret that data. And if you were a researcher, you would say, I can't report on this. This is dog shit research. It means nothing. Or if you had contacted a researcher or you had contacted Facebook, you would realize you had no story at all. But you didn't do that because you're on a jihad. You're not doing journalism. You're on a jihad. You are intentionally trying to do corporate terrorism against your main competitor, which is Facebook, which you're not even transparent about. You're not even saying, oh, by the way, this company that we're doing journalistic terrorism against is our main competitor. So the next, how much longer? 10 more minutes till the Google live stream starts. The next one is Twitch had a do not ban list to keep big time streamers from being suspended. That's interesting. How did they find that out? Is there a leaker whistleblower inside of Twitch? A list of protected streamers was discovered in the massive Twitch leak. Oh, that's how they found out. That occurred earlier this month. So for those who don't know, we covered this extensively. Twitch had a massive mother of all hacks where the entire source code of Twitch was leaked. All of their user lists were leaked. Not only their user list, their earners list and how much their earners make was leaked. And it turns out 1% of the Twitch streamers make half the revenue in the Twitch ecosystem, much like America. So, much like YouTube as well. What an interesting coincidence. It turns out the 1% top achievers earn half the revenue in America and YouTube and Twitch. That's something to think about all on its own. However, the new revelation today is that Twitch had a do not ban list to keep big time streamers from being suspended for doing anything dumb. A list of protected streamers was discovered in the massive Twitch leak that occurred earlier this month. Makes sense. They're the top earners. They're making 50% of the revenue, of which Twitch gets a cut. Of course, they're not going to ban those people from their platforms unless they do something terribly egregious. By the way, it was revealed Facebook also had a similar list called the cross-check list, which their own oversight committee had no knowledge of. And then the oversight committee said, wait a minute, you created this oversight board specifically to police who gets to stay on and off the platform. We, the oversight board, were the ones who decided that Donald Trump could not be on the platform. And now we just found out due to the, and by the way, that was one of the more truly interesting revelations from the Frances Haugen whistleblowing files, which is that this white list rather exists in Facebook, that there was a whole bunch of folks who were not held to be moderated inside the Facebook ecosystem. But I got news for you. Every platform does that shit. Every platform's got a special list of VIPs. I have a Dropbox account I haven't paid a penny for since I got it in 2007. Clubhouse has a whole bunch of friends of the founders and early team members who can do things that normal people wouldn't be able to do. There's people who come to my house who I'll let them use my shower, and I don't let everybody who comes in my house use my shower. This is called common sense. It applies to technologies as well. Just because it's a platform, it isn't some magic Candyland Lego castle in the sky. These are normal people running these companies, and they apply the same logics that you use about who you would take to the airport and who you, oh my God, this just in, Irvin Booker on stage has certain people he'll take to the airport and other people he won't. Yeah, that's how it works. Same if you built a startup. You have a database. You give your friends special permissions in that database. How is that surprising to people? Is a little confusing, but it's just an extension of how human beings work generally. So the next headline is that activists protesting against the Beijing Winter Olympics disrupt the flame lighting ceremony. The Olympic torch for the 2022 Winter Games was lit in Greece on Monday. That's today. Yesterday, ahead of the relay to Beijing. So the very first starts in Greece because that's where the Olympics started. So they start the torch, and they run the torch from Greece all the way to wherever the Olympics is held. In this case, it's going to be the Winter Games in Beijing in 2022, starting in just a few months, like in February, for the Winter Games. And now there were activists protesting at the Olympic flame lighting ceremony in Greece. By the way, get ready. You're going to see that headline a lot in the next few months. And this could get super crazy wild. And in fact, some experts have said, and I'll find the headlines, this could lead to hot conflict. This could be the triggering of all triggerings. Here's why. Beijing is very sensitive about the image of the Beijing Games. They're investing an incredible amount of money, and they have for even over a year. All the self-driving taxis that they have set up for everybody when they arrive to showcase we have self-driving taxis in Beijing. That's ready. That's happening. Their central bank digital currency that they've been working on for a few years now, that they've invested tremendously in, that is specifically being used for the Beijing Games. For all the international athletes and everyone who arrives, you're going to get Chinese digital currency to showcase we have this shit, nobody else does. We've got self-driving taxis, nobody else does. We are the world leaders. We've got our own digital currency. We've got our own self-driving taxis. Welcome to Beijing, everybody. We run the world. Right? They're investing incredibly heavily into this whole Olympics. Every country does this when they get the Olympics. So Beijing's going above and beyond even what other countries would do. Now, because there's going to be a whole lot of people who are going to say boycott the Beijing Games Anybody who has anything to do with Tibet is going to say boycott the games. Anything with anyone to do with Taiwan is going to say boycott the games. Any people and the Uyghurs, they're doing genocide with the Uyghurs. You got a whole lot of folks, even the Hong Kongers.
Australia. Don't forget about Australia being mad.
There's the list is very long. You're going to have a whole lot of people. You had nearly every Hong Kong citizen protesting in Hong Kong while it was still legal to do so. And then China came in with the national security law, wiped that out. But you had the millions, there's only 7 million Hong Kongers. They had protests with 3 million people. Half the population were protesting.
They made a human chain that covered the circumscribed the entire country.
So rest assured, you're going to see a whole lot of escalation of boycotting the Beijing Games. And they're going to use Xinjiang and the Uyghurs as a main focal point of that. Now, Americans are going to get roped into this in a very big way. You're going to see an unprecedented letter writings, phone callings, petitioning to American politicians to speak up and boycott the games, or we're not voting for you in the next election. Rest assured, they're going to get more phone calls and letters than they've ever gotten before on this issue, and it's going to force them to potentially say, you know what, I'm here on the floor, I think we should boycott the Beijing Games. And then what happens? There's a whole bunch of China is very well known to be very directly retaliatorial. So if a country boycotts the games, China stops doing all business with that country. If you know anything about China, and LS certainly does, he can verify that's the modus operandi of how China does international corporate diplomacy. I even highlighted for you with Sweden, with Ericsson and in Huawei, where when Sweden banned Huawei, China retaliated by banning Ericsson. It's just the norm. That's just how it works.
The Olympics, I mean, 1934 Olympics in history was a big deal too. You know, that was the rise of Germany, and we were watching.
So anyway, this could get very hot very quickly if, by the way, here I'm going to predict for you right now how it's going to happen. The big American sponsors of the Olympic Games, you know, the Cokes, you know, the big massive American companies, oh, you better believe they're going to get they're going to have protests in front of their headquarters, their HQs, saying, why are you sponsoring the genocide games? And then when Coke backs out of sponsoring the genocide games, what happens? Then China says no more Coke in China. Shit's going to get real. So just a preview, this little torch lighting protest in Greece, you've seen nothing yet. This is step one of the novel. This is the opening paragraph. So just a little glimpse of what's to come. The next one from BB. Oh, we covered this. China and Russia sail through Japan, in the middle of Japan, through Honshu and Sapporo Island. And Japan, speaking of Japan, Cheryl sends in a really interesting, the live stream starting now for Google Pixel 6 live stream. Yep. It just started. So you go to, I'll tweet the YouTube video now. It just started at the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW.
Tyler, I must say, you've been on fire today.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you didn't cave to the PC police on the sound effect that you use for the jihad.
Yes, it's no big deal. If somebody's offended by it, DM me. We'll discuss it.
Yeah, Tyler, I will talk to you about that one.
Go ahead.
I got a couple of DMs about it.
Sure.
What's the name of this dog? Oh, Tank. Okay.
So the very first example was this lady's walking her dog in Manhattan, and the dog runs up to a Japanese guy, and she says, "Hey Google, help me speak Japanese."
Kind of forgot my keys, but I'm ready to go today. Oh my god.
It's just it's a video, and they're walking into the brand new Google store, their very big first store in the Chelsea area of Manhattan. So it says Pixel Fall Event, and starting now, and it's a whole bunch of footage from inside of the Chelsea store in Manhattan. Here it goes.
Glad you decided to join us today. I'm here in our beautiful Google store in the heart of New York City, where we're going to show you a few new things we've been working on, some of them for quite a long time. Today, you're going to see real breakthroughs across many different technologies and teams at Google, all coming together to create a more helpful, personal smartphone experience for each person. We're doing what Google does, developing advanced technologies and taking on massive scale tech challenges, which in the end are all about helping you out and making your day easier. For so many Google products, from search to Gmail to Google Photos, AI is the foundational technology that lets us deliver helpful experiences to each of our billions of users. AI is driving our vision for ambient computing as well. The idea that helpful technology should always be available, whenever and wherever you need it. From a Google hardware perspective, everything we're doing is in pursuit of that vision, and the smartphone has a huge role to play. The phone is the most personal technology in people's lives. So it's only natural that your phone should be the central control device of an ambient system. Your phone needs to understand you and your world, your context, your unique needs and preferences, how you speak, and what you care about. That's what we set out to create with Pixel, the most personal, most helpful phone. A true Google phone, which takes all the helpfulness and intelligence of Google and adapts it to you. Now, this approach has led to a lot of groundbreaking smartphone innovation over the years, from the Pixel camera to the Google Assistant to the speech and translation models we've pioneered. And we've always done a great job of tuning our software to get the best real-world performance out of Pixel's hardware. Now, this year is quite a bit different. We have state-of-the-art hardware, which means Pixel can deliver even more impressive real-world performance, as well as new AI-driven experiences that have never been possible before.
Oh, told you.
We're getting the most out of leading-edge hardware and software and AI. The brains of our new Pixel lineup is Google Tensor, a mobile system on a chip that we designed specifically around our ambient computing vision and Google's work in AI. Tensor was years in the making. We worked closely with our AI researchers to create machine learning models that run well on Pixel. And we use those models to power all kinds of new experiences that you'll see today. With Tensor, we're connecting Google's AI breakthroughs directly to Pixel. So we can push the limits of helpfulness in a smartphone and turn it from a one-size-fits-all piece of hardware into a device that's intelligent enough to respect and accommodate the differences between each person. Now we can give you Google's best speech recognition in a smartphone. The speech models are trained to understand natural speaking patterns, accents, dialects, and how to translate them accurately into other languages. We've developed the most advanced smartphone camera ever. It intuitively understands how to get the best picture for you. Your life, your friends, your face and skin tone, as well as the nuance in the world around you. We can deliver our most helpful smartphone experience, one that understands and anticipates what you need when you need it. The phone experience